Spygate is the term that is used to describe the fact that members of the Obama administration spied on a rival political presidential campaign, even though Trump never did anything wrong. The hard truth that the spying occurred is not up for debate. The only questions left are, was it justified? Was it legal? And how far up the chain did it go? But there are so many names and so much stuff going on that it gets really confusing really fast. Today, I'm going to break this story down. There were 3 plans that were deployed against the Trump team, and this video will be broken down into those plans. During Plan A, there was unofficial foreign intelligence gathering, unmasking, and FISA 702 query abuse occurring. They got caught during Plan A and moved on to Plan B, which involved getting a FISA warrant with no valid evidence of wrongdoing and launching the FBI counterintelligence investigation that was called Crossfirehurricane. Plan C came after the election, and that involved getting President Trump out of office by any means necessary. It's October 9th in 2016 during the second presidential debate.
It's just awfully good that someone with the temperament of Donald Trump is not in charge of the law in our country.
Because you'd be in jail.
Secretary Clinton.
Hillary Clinton should have been concerned that she was going to lose the election, but she wasn't. You see, there was a whole team of people working behind the scenes to make sure that Donald Trump never became president. Donald Trump announced that he was running for president on June 16th in 2015. A lot of people didn't take him seriously. They thought it was part of a publicity stunt in order to increase ratings on his other shows. But by November in 2015, it was established that he was a serious contender, and that is when the spying began. The first step of the spying process began on July 20th in 2015. Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates put out a 58-page memo telling the Inspector General to go kick rocks. The FBI and the Department of Justice, particularly the National Security Division, didn't have to turn over all records like everyone else, particularly those involving Title III, which is wiretapping. Because who wants oversight when you're about to break the law? And besides, there was no Inspector General at state when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, so why start now? The first step happened so early into the presidential race that it makes me think that Team Hillary planned on spying on whoever the Republican nominee was, and Trump just so happened to be the guy that won. Now, with what they thought was the successful minimization of oversight in place, Team Hillary launched Plan A in November of 2015. They figured out that they could get all the opposition research they wanted by using a combination of using unofficial Five Eyes information, unmasking, and abusing the FISA 702 query process. Five Eyes is an intelligence alliance made up of Australia, New Zealand, Canada, the UK, and the US. In late 2015, CIA Director John Brennan began receiving unofficial Five Eyes information about a possible Trump-Russia connection. We know that the intelligence was unofficial because Congressman Devin Nunes stated in April of 2018 there was never any official intelligence used to open the FBI counterintelligence investigation into the Trump campaign. Robert Hannigan, the director of the UK's GCHQ, which is responsible for signals intelligence, even traveled to America to meet with Brennan in the summer of 2016 to pass him information. This was odd because the GCHQ is the UK's equivalent of the NSA. Brennan's counterpart would have been the head of MI6. Hannigan's counterpart would have been NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers, not CIA Director Brennan. So British officials that were supposed to be our allies were helping the Obama administration spy on Trump, who never colluded with Russia. Could it have been related to Trump's pro-Brexit stance and him being tough on the EU? I don't know. Only time will tell. Brennan was also taking part in unmasking members of the Trump campaign, which can occur with incidental collection. Incidental collection happens when a person is in contact with a surveillance target. So if I email Bob and Bob is under surveillance, even if I just say, hey, nice mustache, my email gets collected. Incidental collection can happen under Title III of the Omnibus Crime Control and Safe Streets Act of 1968, which means going to court and getting a warrant because a U.S. citizen is being targeted. Incidental collection can also occur under FISA Titles I and III, which is called traditional FISA. Once again, a warrant is needed for this process because it applies to people, property, or facilities inside of the United States, and when the proposed target is believed to be a foreign power or an agent of a foreign power. Additionally, incidental collection also happens when you are dealing with surveillance pursuant to Section 702 of the FISA Amendments Act. Surveillance under 702 does not require a warrant because it's supposed to target foreign terrorists on foreign soil. The Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence have complete discretion over who the targets for surveillance are, and the standard for surveillance is much lower. It's simply for foreign intelligence information. Reverse targeting, which is the targeting of a foreigner with the intent of getting information on an American citizen, is strictly prohibited. If a surveillance target is communicating with an American citizen, minimization procedures are supposed to take effect. Part of those procedures include changing the citizen's name to U.S. Person 1 in order to protect the privacy of that citizen when a classified intelligence report is made. Unmasking is the term used when the American citizen's name is revealed. It can only be done for national security purposes and when the name of the citizen will help give context to the information. Leaking unmasked names is a criminal offense, and unmasking Americans for reasons other than national security is called espionage. And under federal law, espionage is a felony that can carry the death penalty.
So first, I recently confirmed that on numerous occasions, the intelligence community incidentally collected information about U.S. citizens involved in the Trump transition. Details about U.S. persons associated with the incoming administration, details with little or no apparent foreign intelligence value, were widely disseminated in intelligence community reporting. Third, I have confirmed that additional names of Trump transition team members were unmasked. And fourth and finally, I want to be clear, none of this surveillance was related to Russia or the investigation of Russian activities or of the Trump team.
CIA Director John Brennan, UN Ambassador Samantha Power, National Security Advisor Susan Rice, and Director of National Intelligence James Clapper are just some of the Obama administration officials that are guilty of unmasking members of the Trump team.
Mr. Clapper and Ms. Yates, did either of you ever request the unmasking of Mr. Trump, his associates, or any member of Congress?
Yes.
The unmasking of the Trump team associates would continue even after the election. Finally, in November of 2015, around the same time John Brennan was receiving unofficial Five Eyes intelligence information, the FBI was abusing the FISA 702 query process. There are two ways that the NSA gathers information under FISA Section 702. Downstream collection, which was previously known as PRISM, and upstream collection.
Does the NSA collect any type of data at all on millions or hundreds of millions of Americans?
No, sir.
It does not.
Not wittingly. There are cases where they could inadvertently, perhaps, collect, but not wittingly.
For downstream collection, the NSA gets user information directly from U.S. companies like Facebook, Google, Skype, and YouTube. With upstream collection, the NSA essentially wiretaps the underwater fiber optic cables that the vast majority of global internet traffic flows through. Intelligence analysts can then run different kinds of searches or queries on the data the NSA collected by entering selectors into the system. Selectors are things like names, email addresses, phone numbers, IP addresses, and keywords. 702.16s are to and from queries. That means you can search the upstream and downstream data and retrieve any information that is sent to or is sent from a foreign target of surveillance that is on foreign soil. There are also 702.17s, which are about queries. These are only available from searching the upstream data. These messages simply mention or are about a foreign surveillance target that is on foreign soil. So if I sent an email that said, "I hate terrorist Joe," to a friend of mine in the US, my totally domestic email could be captured without a warrant. Fortunately, about queries ended under the Trump administration. Querying the NSA database will give you all kinds of information, like emails, social media account data, voice and video chats, and photographs. As you can see, having access to raw FISA 702 data could be a powerful weapon if it fell into the wrong hands. And that's exactly what the FBI did deliberately and illegally. The FBI gave private contractors, people with no legal authority whatsoever, access to raw FISA data. I know it sounds unbelievable, but it's all detailed in a 99-page, unsealed Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court report dated April 26th of 2017. The contractor's access was not limited to the raw information for which the FBI had sought assistance, and the private contractor's access continued even after their work for the FBI had been completed. The names of the private contractors that the FBI broke the law to give access to have been redacted. But according to former U.S. Attorney for Washington, D.C., Joe DeGeneva, those contractors included Fusion GPS and CrowdStrike. I'll be explaining who those contractors are during Plan B.
It is believed that among those contractors were Fusion GPS and CrowdStrike. And I've seen two reports about CrowdStrike being among the private contractors that were given access to raw 702 incidental collection of American citizens under FISA warrants. If that is true, they have committed crimes. The Bureau who gave them information committed crimes.
The FBI may have gotten away with their criminal activity if it wasn't for the heroic efforts of one man. And that man was NSA Director Admiral Mike Rogers. It's worth noting that most of the people that worked for the government agencies that were involved with the spying were good people. There were just a few bad hombres at the top that conducted themselves in a possibly treasonous fashion. So between late 2015 and early 2016, Admiral Rogers noticed something strange was going on with the 702 queries. On January 7th of 2016, NSA Inspector General George Ellard wrote a report noting that there were 702 violations occurring, including using American citizens' information to query the upstream data, which really isn't supposed to happen because 702 upstream queries are supposed to target foreign terrorists on foreign soil. Admiral Rogers turned around and ordered a fundamental baseline review of compliance associated with 702. But the review wouldn't be completed until October 20th of 2016. On March 9th in 2016, Department of Justice oversight personnel reported the FBI had been giving private contractors access to raw FISA data.
The Obama administration figures out that through unmasking, in other words, wiretapping people, pretending they're targeting foreigners, and then querying information in this database, that they can get all the political opposition research in the world that they need against the Trump team. It's beautiful. No one's going to call them out. The media's on their side, right? Mike Rogers of the NSA senses that there's something wrong about these about queries. In other words, who's tapping into the database here and making political queries? Because Mike Rogers goes to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court and says, Houston, we got a problem. These queries are supposed to follow very specific guidelines about terrorism and all these metrics have to be. You can't just spy on Americans in the database.
On April 18th of 2016, Admiral Rogers shut down the FBI's private contractor access to raw FISA data while his investigation continued. Also on March 9th of 2016, the same day the DOJ reported about the FBI's FISA abuse, Lisa Page sent a text to Peter Strzok saying that the FBI had messed up in a major way. Meet Peter Strzok and Lisa Page. They're both married, just not to each other. He's a high-level FBI agent and she is a top FBI lawyer. You would think that holding those kinds of positions would mean that you were smart, but you'd be wrong. These two lovebirds are going to text each other all kinds of fun stuff, like how much they love Hillary and how much they hate Trump and evidence that can be used against them in a court of law.
Agent Strzok had Hillary Clinton winning the White House before he finished investigating her. Agent Strzok had Donald Trump impeached before he even started investigating him. Agent Strzok thinks pronouncing someone innocent before bothering to interview more than 30 different witnesses isn't bias. He thinks claiming you can smell the Trump supporters isn't bias. He thinks talking about an insurance policy to keep someone from becoming president isn't bias. And he said Trump would be destabilizing, called him an idiot, abysmal, bigoted nonsense, called him a disaster. Said he should F himself. Strzok promised to stop Trump from becoming president before the investigation even began. He talked longingly of Trump resigning 2 months after he was inaugurated and well before the special counsel investigation even began. Strzok even talked about impeachment the day special counsel was appointed. That is prejudging guilt, it is prejudging punishment, and it is textbook bias.
If you want to represent what you said accurately, I'm happy to answer that question, but I don't appreciate what was originally said being changed.
I don't give a damn what you appreciate, Agent Strzok. I don't appreciate having an FBI agent with an unprecedented level of animus working on 2 major investigations during 2016.
You would think that you'd at least use a burner phone if you were about to follow the yellow brick road down to Treason Town. That's right, they got caught up in a hurricane, a crossfire hurricane. Plan A was over and done with because they got caught. And since their avenue to illegally spy on the Trump team by tapping into the FISA 702 data had been cut off, Team Hillary decided to try spying on the Trump team legally. Sort of. By assembling an interagency task force, launching the FBI counterintelligence operation called Crossfire Hurricane, and obtaining a FISA warrant. FISA warrants come with the 2-hop rule. That means that when they took out a warrant on Carter Page, they got to hop to or analyze the communications of everyone that he contacted, like his boss, and then hop a second time to analyze the records of everyone that his boss contacted, like Donald Trump and Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, basically everyone in the campaign. And FISA warrants are retroactive, meaning that it allowed them to go back and look at records from years prior. A FISA warrant would have been perfect for Team Hillary because it involved using a secret court, and so when Hillary Clinton won all of this, it would all be swept under the rug. Now, I think they were drunk when they came up with Plan B. They never thought that Trump would win. They believed their own fake news media polls and reports saying that Trump had no chance of winning. They all just sat around drinking their own spiked Kool-Aid. So Lisa Page and Peter Strzok, accompanied by FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe and FBI Director James Comey, met up, and the heartless, brainless cowards decided to follow the yellow brick road down to Treasontown, where CIA Director John Brennan had assembled an interagency task force so that both domestic and foreign intelligence agencies could all meet at the CIA headquarters in Langley and share information on Trump in or before April of 2016.
Orange Man bad.
Brennan had received a bogus tip from one of the Baltic states that the Trump campaign was receiving money from Russia, which led in part to the now debunked conspiracy theory that Hillary Clinton pushed, that she wasn't the only one with a secret server. No, Trump had one too. And it was inside of Trump Tower, and it had been set up to communicate privately with a Putin-tied Russian bank called Alpha Bank that was owned by Alpha Group.
What is your problem?
I'm sorry. I'm allergic to bullcrap.
Guards!
Hey, don't you think this whole the Republican candidate is in league with Russia narrative is just a bit worn out? I mean, we just used this one against John McCain, citing McCain's ties to Paul Manafort. The same Paul Manafort that we're now saying ties Trump to Russia? I mean, we're not even changing the people in this tired script. Oh! Democratic operatives of every ilk crawled out from under their rocks to assist the Clinton campaign in any way they could. Who or what in the heck are you? I'm Alexandria Chalupa, a DNC operative. I'm going to tell Politico all about how the Ukrainian embassy worked directly with me and investigative journalists researching Trump, Paul Manafort, and Russia. Wait, you're going to tell Politico that you were colluding with a foreign nation in order to influence a presidential election while you were working as a contractor for the DNC? Yep, the DNC already knows all about it. I did good, right? You can't possibly be that stupid. So I'm going to retract my statement. Oh, you think? Yeah, retract your statement. Now go. Just go. Brennan's interagency task force in Langley gave Team Hillary a great place to meet and strategize. There were 7 things they needed to do during Plan B. Number 1, illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified emails. Number 2, set up George Papadopoulos so there is a reason to open an official investigation. Number 3, pick a person to falsely accuse of being a Russian agent in order to get a FISA warrant. Number 4, find someone to make up and write up lies. Number 5, set up even more Trump campaign members. Number 6, fake a defensive briefing to spy on candidate Trump and General Michael Flynn. And number 7, verify and submit lies to the court. Number 1, illegally exonerate Hillary Clinton for mishandling classified emails. There is too much information on this subject for me to put it all in this video. So quickly, in March of 2015, the world learned that Hillary Clinton had exclusively used a private email address and had a secret server in her basement when she was Secretary of State. When she left her position in 2013, she did not turn over her email records in violation of the Federal Records Act. It didn't matter what laws she broke, the fix was in. Andrew McCabe made sure she got special treatment.
And we have email evidence from Andrew McCabe indicating that Hillary Clinton was going to get a HQ special, a headquarters special. That meant that the normal processes at the Washington field office weren't followed.
Attorney General Loretta Lynch instructed FBI Director Comey to call it a matter instead of an investigation. And Peter Strzok helped Comey draft Hillary Clinton's exoneration letter before she was even interviewed. So no one cared when Loretta Lynch didn't recuse herself after she met with Bill Clinton on the tarmac, or that Andy McCabe's wife, Jill McCabe, got almost $500,000 from a PAC that Hillary Clinton raised money for her Senate race, or that 33,000 of her emails were deleted after she received a subpoena, or that Hillary Clinton's aide smashed her phones with a hammer, or that her server was wiped with BleachBit before it was turned over to the FBI, or that her server had information on it from the intelligence communities, or that her emails were hacked by China, which could explain how the Chinese were able to imprison or execute 18 to 20 people working with the CIA from 2010 to 2012, which just so happened to be during the years she was Secretary of State.
I've actually spoken to the members of DOD who discovered this flaw. This flaw was discovered by the intelligence community part of the Department of Defense. It was the ODNI Inspector General's office, and they did a full evaluation. They received the same copy of the email server and all the emails that the FBI had. They looked at the metadata. So every email, as you know, and your audience probably knows, within the data which moves the email, there's router information that indicates who sent the email, when it was sent, how it was sent, the route it took, and anybody else who gets copies of it. So within this very deep metadata review, the ODNI IG discovered that in every email except for like 7 were being sent to a third party. That third party was apparently, I'm told, a business that is in Manassas, Virginia, and that business was owned or is owned by the Chinese intelligence service. And there was a drop at this place, and then it was sent off to Chicago, is what I was briefed. And what's significant about this is not so much that I know, it's the fact that according to the ODNI IG, Peter Strzok, the guy in charge of the Clinton email investigation within the FBI, was briefed on this 3 times. The 2 implications are, first, anything that Hillary Clinton had on its server was compromised to the Chinese intelligence service, which indicates to me that by law, there's supposed to be a damage assessment conducted by this compromise. Jim Clapper, when he was ODNI himself, was asked about, why haven't you done a damage assessment? And he just said, I just don't want to do it. I don't think, that's a good answer. Secondly, there is other evidence the Chinese have been very effective in eating our lunch. We lost a number of assets back about 2011, 2012 in Beijing. We've never recovered from that. And there's other indicators the Chinese are very effective in their intelligence collection programs against us. So I think we need to do a review of everything we're doing to figure out why the Chinese are so effective.
There was an Inspector General for the House, and she was brilliant. She had a notebook with all kinds of information about the investigation that firmly established what appeared to be crimes being committed. Sure. The FBI did not interview her until 2 or 3 days before the sentencing hearing. And basically they called her in and told her, do not, under any circumstances, bring your notebook or anything with you. You just come, don't bring anything. And then what I understood was the FBI reported back to Jeff Sessions. We looked into it, and the IG, she doesn't have anything. And they spent over 2 hours basically threatening her that they would come after her if she didn't drop it. That's the kind of deep state we're talking about. The Inspector General of the intelligence community, our intelligence, came forward, told the FBI, including Peter Strzok, we have 100% certainty, we got proof, and the FBI released a statement at the end of August saying, we have no evidence that her private server was ever hacked. Yeah, because you refused to accept the evidence.
We did not find direct evidence that Secretary Clinton's personal email domain, in its various configurations since 2009, was hacked successfully. Finally, with respect to our recommendation to the Department of Justice, although there is evidence of potential violations of the statutes regarding the handling of classified information, our judgment is that no reasonable prosecutor would bring such a case.
And how did Hillary Clinton react to all of this?
I never sent classified material on my email, and I never received any that was marked classified.
Hold on. Did that lying witch really just go out there and say that as Secretary of State, not as Secretary of a dentist office, but as Secretary of State, she never sent or received any classified information? Which, please?
I will reiterate, because it's a fact, nothing I sent or received was marked classified.
Secretary Clinton said there was nothing marked classified on her emails, either sent or received. Was that true?
That's not true.
Everything I did was permitted by law and regulation. I had one device.
Secretary Clinton said she used just one device. Was that true?
She used multiple devices during the 4 years of her term as Secretary of State.
I responded right away and provided all my emails that could possibly be work-related. We turned over everything that was work-related, every single thing.
Secretary Clinton said all work-related emails were returned to the State Department. Was that true?
No, we found work-related emails, thousands, that were not returned.
You were the official in charge. Did you like this order?
What, like with a cloth or something? Well, no.
Secretary Clinton said neither she nor anyone else deleted work-related emails from her personal account. Was that true?
That's a harder one to answer. We found traces of work-related emails on devices or in Slack space, whether they were deleted or whether when a server was changed out, something happened to them. There's no doubt that there were work-related emails that were removed electronically from the email system.
So you have a rogue email system set up before she took the oath of office. Thousands of what we now know to be classified emails, some of which were classified at the time. One of her more frequent email comrades was in fact hacked, and you don't know whether or not she was. And this scheme took place over a long period of time and resulted in the destruction of public records, and yet you say there is insufficient evidence of intent.
I've never had a subpoena. Now, I didn't have to turn over anything. I chose to turn over 55,000 pages of my emails.
And drawing on what you just said, that very few, but no requests for Benghazi came to your attention, I'd like to show you something. This pile represents the emails that you sent or received about Libya in 2011, from February through December of 2011. This pile represents the emails you sent or received from early 2012 until the day of the attack. There are 795 emails in this pile. We've counted them. There are 67 emails in this pile in 2012. In this pile in 2011, I see daily updates, sometimes hourly updates, from your staff about Benghazi and Chris Stevens. When I look at this pile in 2012, I only see a handful of emails to you from your senior staff about Benghazi. There is not one email to you or from you in 2012 when an explosive device went off at our compound in April. There's not a single email in your records about that explosive device. So my question is, this was a very important mission in 2011. You sent Chris Stevens there, but yet when our compound is attacked in 2012, what kind of culture was created in the State Department that your folks couldn't tell you in an email about a bomb in April of 2012?
If you were to be in my office in the State Department, I didn't have a computer. I did not conduct most of the business that I did on behalf of our country on email.
Number 2, set up George Papadopoulos so there is a reason to open an official investigation. Explaining what happened in the Spygate saga is difficult because there are two different versions of the story. There's the Team Hillary version that the fake news media happily spread to harm President Trump's reputation, and then there's the truth. Team Hillary needed an official reason to open the FBI Operation Crossfire Hurricane so they could get a FISA warrant. And according to the New York Times, that reason was George Papadopoulos, not the Steele dossier.
We need a reason to open Operation Crossfire Hurricane, even though Trump is innocent.
Let's go after George Papadopoulos.
Excellent.
George Papadopoulos was a 28-year-old foreign policy advisor for the Trump campaign. In the Team Hillary version of the story, Papadopoulos first met Maltese professor Joseph Misuse in Italy on March 14th of 2016. They met up again in London, where Mifsud introduced him to several Russians. Then, on April 26th of 2016, Mifsud told Papadopoulos that the Russians had dirt on Hillary in the form of thousands of emails. This was before the public knew about the DNC hack. A few weeks later, Papadopoulos got rip-roaring drunk and told Australian diplomat Alexander Downer about the Russians having emails and dirt on Hillary. Australian officials passed that information to their counterparts in America 2 months later when the leaked DNC emails were published online. And the FBI responded by launching Operation Crossfire Hurricane on July 31st of 2016. In the Team Hillary version of the story, Mifsud was portrayed as a Russian asset that was acting as an intermediary between Russia and the Trump campaign via Papadopoulos. There are a couple of problems with this account. First, George Papadopoulos could not have been the reason they began the investigation because Team Hillary was spying on the Trump campaign before Papadopoulos was even associated with it.
As you know, for a long time, FBI DOJ have been claiming that they didn't do anything until the end of July. That's not true. This investigation started in early 2016, and I actually believe it's possible it even started in late 2015.
Second, Papadopoulos stated that he didn't accidentally meet Mifsud. His introduction to Mifsud was facilitated in part by FBI lawyer Avinder Sambe. And Mifsud wasn't a Russian spy. He was working with Western intelligence.
I don't understand why the FBI told the world that this was a Russian agent when the truth is that I was introduced to him by an FBI intermediary. I met him at a Western intelligence spy school in Rome, and that this man's entire career and network involves himself meeting with high-level British and American intelligence officials, including after I told the FBI that he was a potential Russian agent. And his own lawyer has made unambiguous statements about who he is, and that is that this man was no Russian agent. This man was working on behalf of Western intelligence and was actively, probably under the guidance of the FBI itself, when he was interacting with George Papadopoulos. Even the FBI, in my meeting with them in December, where I asked them in a very naive way, why are you not arresting Joseph Mifsud? I told you a year ago that this man told me about Russian emails, and now I see pictures of him online with the UK's Foreign Minister Boris Johnson in London. Haven't you notified MI6, the MI5? And the FBI agents are laughing at me.
It is impossible that Mifsud, Professor Mifsud, is a Russian asset. He was a former diplomat with the Malta government. He lived in Italy. He worked and taught FBI, trained FBI officials, and worked with FBI officials.
Third, the meeting with Downer wasn't by chance either. Downer sought him out. He wasn't drunk. He only had one drink, and he believes that Downer and others were spying on him.
April 15th, the Australian government reached out to me for the first time. April 26th, Joseph Mifsud tells me this information. May 2nd, I have the British government reaching out to me from this man Tobias Elwood, who was the number 2 at the British Ministry of Foreign Affairs, where he wants to have a conversation with me and get to know me a little bit. May 4th, I'm contacted by 2 officials of the DIA at the U.S. Embassy in London named Gregory Baker and Terence Dudley. And then I meet on May 10th this Australian diplomat, Alexander Downer, who I testified under oath at Congress and told the FBI and Bob Mueller that I felt he was spying on me and recording my conversation.
So there was never a situation where Papadopoulos was working with the Russians to try to affect the 2016 election. This was all a setup.
But Team Hillary had a problem. Papadopoulos didn't spread the information about the Russians having Hillary's emails around the Trump campaign like they hoped he would. And in response, Team Hillary sent several spies to try and get Papadopoulos to admit he was in league with the Russians. And these were spies, not informants, because informants are people inside of an organization. Spies are outsiders, and these people definitely were not part of the Trump campaign.
We are sending spies into the Trump campaign. The best of the best. No one will ever see them coming. Azra, Honey Trap Turk, and Stefan Halper, whose code name is the Walrus.
Stefan the Walrus Halper made contact with several Trump campaign members. The first was Trump campaign foreign policy advisor Carter Page on July 11th of 2016, which was weeks before Crossfire Hurricane officially opened. Next was National Co-Chairman Sam Clovis, and finally, George Papadopoulos on September 2nd of 2016. The Walrus offered to pay Papadopoulos $3,000 to write a paper for him, but first, Papadopoulos would have to meet his assistant, Azra Honey Trap Turk, in mid-September of 2016.
She was very provocative, let's say scantily dressed at best, okay? And she wants to try and seduce me and get me to say things that aren't true. For example, about Russia and all this, nonsense. I basically say, okay, I don't know what you're talking about.
The next day, he met with the Walrus.
I had no idea who Stefan Halper was until he emailed me out of the blue on, I think, September 2nd, 2016, where he wanted to basically pay me to hear my thoughts. He says, I want to meet with you. So we meet over drinks, and he pulls his phone out. So right away, I think this guy's doing something that he shouldn't be doing. And he tells me, George, it's obviously, in your interest to be working with Russia, to hack emails, and that the Russians are helping you, and that you're complicit in this conspiracy. Isn't that right, George? These open-ended, very strange things. And I told him flat out, I don't know what you're talking about. What you're talking about is treason. I have zero information about what you're talking about, and neither does anyone on the campaign, so just leave me alone.
So they didn't place spies in the campaign, but they sent spies to record senior members of the campaign in the middle of a presidential campaign when that candidate was the nominee for the other major party that was the opposing party to the one in power. Is that right?
They send confidential human sources in to do those.
FBI sent someone in, pretending to be somebody else, to talk with George Papadopoulos, who was with the Trump campaign. You know what they call that? It's called spying. They did it.
Mifsud was connected to Italian intelligence, and both Downer and Mifsud had MI6 and Five Eyes ties. Now here's the kicker. They were both Clinton guys. Not only was he a donor, but Mifsud told the Italian news that he's a Clinton Foundation member, and Downer helped secure and personally signed off on a $25 million donation to the Clinton Foundation from the Australian government. So the FBI made sure Papadopoulos met Mifsud, who was Clinton guy number one.
Mifsud was the guy who set up Papadopoulos.
Clinton guy number one inserted the information. Clinton guy number two, Downer, extracted the information, and Clinton guys numbers 3 and 4 tried to get Papadopoulos to cop to a crime he didn't commit. Number 3, pick a person to falsely accuse of being a Russian agent in order to get a FISA warrant.
We are going to have to pick someone in the Trump campaign and say that they are a Russian agent to get this FISA warrant. Any suggestions?
Hey, how about Carter Page?
Who is Carter Page?
He's one of Trump's foreign policy advisors. He's had contact with Russian spies. Yeah, but we already know Carter Page isn't a spy because he's been working with the FBI since 2013 to help convict an actual Russian spy. Guys, this is all documented. Besides, why would Putin trust a man that is helping the FBI to lock up Russian spies? You guys have to be smarter than this.
Guards!
Oh, seriously? This whole FISA warrant thing was a hoax from the start. They knew Carter Page wasn't a spy from the very beginning. That's why they never even bothered to charge him. The FBI had information that the DNC's computer system had been compromised as early as 2015, and they decided to pin that on Trump too. On June 14th in 2016, the Washington Post published an article saying Russian government hackers penetrated the DNC. Russia said they didn't do it. WikiLeaks founder Julian Assange, who would go on to leak some of the DNC emails, said Russia didn't do it. Hacker Guccifer 2.0 said he did it and released more information. Then candidate Donald Trump said the DNC hacked itself. Next, information came out noting that the speed at which the stolen files were copied was faster than what consumer internet services can do, and therefore it was possible that someone with access to the DNC servers used a USB drive to steal the information in person. The FBI said Russia did it, which was funny because the FBI didn't do the investigation. So the DNC, that would have you believe that Trump worked with Russia to hack them, says, we have proof right here on our servers, but don't look at it. And they never gave the servers over to the FBI. And at the same time, the FBI said, national security? What national security? We don't want the full power of the U.S. government looking into this. No subpoenas necessary. But I think I heard something about Trump and some golden showers, so we better go check that out. The DNC used the law firm Perkins Coie to hire a private firm called CrowdStrike to do the investigation. CrowdStrike has many ties to Hillary Clinton, including several billionaires that are multi-million-dollar Clinton Foundation donors. CrowdStrike, which I'm sure isn't biased at all, came to the conclusion that Russia hacked the DNC, and that's the official story for now.
A federal investigator telling Fox News that an FBI forensic report of Rich's computer showed he made contact with WikiLeaks through a former reporter and London-based WikiLeaks director, Gavin McFadden. The investigator told Fox News Rich provided McFadden with more than 44,000 emails, nearly 18,000 attachments. Rich was murdered near his D.C. home on the morning of July 10th, but his wallet, his cell phone, his watch not taken. WikiLeaks 12 days later published internal emails showing top DNC officials trading ideas on how to hurt Senator Bernie Sanders at the polls, and those emails resulting in the resignation of Debbie Wasserman Schultz, who was the chair of the DNC, and the DNC's 3 top officials.
Number 4, find someone to make up and write up lies. Team Hillary realized that in order to get the FISA warrant they so desperately wanted, they would need to supply the court with evidence of crimes that were never committed. So they decided to hire a chef that could sprinkle a little tinkle on this poop sandwich they were about to feed the American public. So in April of 2016, the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid the law firm Perkins Coie to hire the research firm Fusion GPS to write the infamous Steele dossier that was full of Russian lies. Fusion GPS turned around and hired former British spy Christopher Steele. The funny thing about Christopher Steele was that while he was being paid by Fusion GPS, he was also being paid by the FBI. The FBI made a series of 11 payments to him in 2016. Please, someone in this room has to have a brain. Christopher Steele is already being paid by the Clinton campaign and the DNC. We can't pay him to. Think of the paper trail.
Guards, take him away.
But no one had a brain. Fusion GPS also hired former CIA contractor Nellie Orr, who just so happened to be married to Bruce Orr. Bruce Orr was an Associate Deputy Attorney General, the 4th highest ranked man in DOJ. His wife Nellie was getting money from Fusion GPS while he was assisting with the investigation into the Trump campaign by spreading the information that his family was financially profiting off of around the FBI and DOJ.
What we should be worried about is Bruce Ohr, senior official at the Justice Department's wife, was working for the firm hired by the Clintons to put together the dossier. And we know the dossier was the key to all of this. And Bruce Ohr, Peter Strzok told us in the hearing, Bruce Ohr is the guy who funneled parts of the dossier to the FBI.
Fusion GPS was co-founded by Glenn Simpson, and Glenn Simpson was married to Mary Jacoby. On April 19th of 2016, the very next day after Admiral Rogers shut down private contractor access to the NSA database, Mary J. went to a meeting at the White House. Yep, nothing suspicious about that at all. Not at all. And while the media has been crediting Christopher Steele with writing the dossier, Mary J., not to be outdone, took to Facebook and posted that it was actually her husband that deserved all the credit for writing the dossier. And she was partially correct, because he started writing the dossier in 2007. That's right, 2007. In 2007, Mary J. and Glenn Simpson co-authored a piece in the Wall Street Journal titled How Lobbyists Help Ex-Soviets Woo Washington, featuring some of the same information and same players that appear in the dossier, like Paul Manafort, Viktor Yanukovych, and Alpha Group. Alpha Group owned Alpha Bank, the same bank from the phony Trump Tower server story, and Paul Manafort was demonized for his lobbying on behalf of the pro-Russian president of the Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych. And in 2008, when the Democrats tried to push the John McCain is in bed with Russia narrative, Glenn Simpson and Mary J. were right there, and they wrote an article called McCain Consultant is Tied to Work for Ukraine Party, once again featuring more people and information that would be lobbed against Trump. FBI Director Comey and the Democrats tried to push the lie that the Republicans funded the dossier.
My understanding was the activity was begun, that Steele was hired to look into, was first funded by Republicans.
But that's not true.
I'm sorry?
That's not true. That the dossier that Christopher Steele worked on was funded by Republicans?
The Washington Free Beacon, a conservative website, hired Fusion GPS to research some of the Republican primary candidates. They also hired separate firms to do research on Hillary Clinton. The Washington Free Beacon discontinued the services of Fusion GPS once Trump became the Republican nominee. To debunk the lying Democrats, the Washington Free Beacon revealed that the research provided by Fusion GPS was based on public sources. Christopher Steele was not involved, they did not pay for or have any knowledge of the dossier, and none of the work product that the Free Beacon received from Fusion GPS appeared in the Steele dossier. The dossier was comprised of 16 memos that ranged in date from June 20th of 2016 to December 13th of 2016. The dossier was a hot piece of garbage that read like bad tween fan fiction, and it was full of misspelled words. Hillary Clinton was cast as the good and pure heroine that Putin hated and feared. Hillary Clinton was so wonderful and amazing that no matter how hard they tried, the Russians just couldn't seem to find any dirt that would embarrass her. Nope, not one single thing. On the other hand, Trump was cast as a buffoon that cared more about hookers and golden showers than he did about money. And Putin was the greatest psychic of all time because way back in 2011, he thought to himself, I really need a Republican president that I can use as a puppet. Who should I choose? Paul Ryan? Nah, he's got too much experience. Mitt Romney? Nah, he's got too much of a chance of winning. I know. Reality TV star Donald Trump. That's who I'm gonna target. Seriously, the only thing you need to do to debunk the dossier is to read the dossier. I'm gonna say that again. The only thing you need to do to debunk the dossier is to read the dossier. It makes claims that are over the top and completely laughably ridiculous, all while contradicting itself. Paul Manafort, who was Trump's campaign chairman, was managing the collusion with Russia by using Carter Page as an intermediary. Carter Page, the Carter Page that everyone knew wasn't a spy, Carter Page. Carter Page helps put together a deal to give himself and Trump's associates up to a 19% privatized stake in Rosneft, a Russian energy company, in exchange for lifting sanctions. That would have been about $12 billion. That's billion with a B. It's beyond absurd. Russia only had to give the Clintons millions of dollars during the Uranium One scandal, so why wouldn't Putin just back Hillary? She's way less expensive. And another one of the dossier claims is that they have the PP tape on Trump so they can use it to blackmail him. Wouldn't blackmailing Trump be a lot easier than giving away $12 billion? At a time when Russia was dealing with huge budget deficits? Michael Cohen, Trump's personal lawyer, goes to Prague in order to pay off Russian hackers in this fairy tale. But Michael Cohen never went to Prague, and his passport proved it. Page 1 says, so far, Trump has declined various sweetener real estate business deals offered him in Russia in order to further the Kremlin's cultivation of him. Page 2 says, the Kremlin's cultivation operation on Trump also had comprised offering him various lucrative real estate development business deals in Russia, especially in relation to the ongoing 2018 World Cup soccer tournament. However, so far, for reasons unknown, Trump had not taken up any of these. But wait, the page before said he turned down real estate offers to further the Kremlin's cultivation of him. And now you don't know why? Page 8 says, finally, regarding Trump's claimed minimal investment profile in Russia, a separate source with direct knowledge said this had not been for want of trying. Trump's previous efforts had included exploring the real estate sector in St. Petersburg as well as Moscow. But in the end, Trump had to settle for the use of extensive sexual services there from local prostitutes rather than business success. Remember page 2 said that they offered him lucrative deals in relation to the World Cup? Well, St. Petersburg and Moscow, these two cities that Trump supposedly wants in on, are part of the World Cup package. Russia was building new stadiums and infrastructure in both of those cities. The Russians are supposedly offering him deals on a silver platter exactly where he wants, and the man that builds hotels all over the world is now suddenly so inept that he can do nothing but go to a brothel. I wasn't joking when I said this was poorly written. Finally, page 27. Trump had visited St. Petersburg on several occasions in the past and had been interested in doing business deals there involving real estate. The local business/political elite figure reported that Trump had paid bribes there to further his interests, but very discreetly and only through affiliated companies, making it very hard to prove. The local services industry source reported that Trump had participated in sex parties in the city too, but that all direct witnesses to this recently had been silenced, i.e. bribed or coerced to disappear. So he wants to build buildings. He doesn't want to build buildings. They offer him sweetheart real estate deals. He's got to bribe his way into the real estate market. Which one of these scenarios is supposed to be true? I mean, yes, we know that this is all lies, but seriously, did anybody read this? The dossier debunks itself. And as these dossier memos are being written, they're making their way back to the intelligence community through a number of channels. One such channel was with Bruce Orr at the Mayflower Hotel on July 30th of 2016, which just so happened to be the day before Operation Crossfire Hurricane was launched. Okay, why don't you read me what you got so far?
Trump's perverted conduct in Moscow included hiring the presidential suite of the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, where he knew President and Mrs. Obama, whom he hated had stayed on one of their official trips to Russia and defiling the bed where they had slept by employing a number of prostitutes to perform a golden showers urination show in front of him. The hotel was known to be under FSB control with microphones and concealed cameras in all the main rooms to record anything they wanted to. How does that sound to you, old chap? Seems legit.
Number 5. Set up even more Trump campaign members. While the dossier was being written, there still wasn't any evidence of the Trump campaign colluding with Russia, so Team Hillary decided to trump some up. Mysterious and shadowy figures had been approaching the Trump campaign left and right. The Walrus was doing his thing, Honey Trap was doing her thing, Alexander Downer was trying to figure out which version of the story he told about Papadopoulos was the truth. Mifsud was preparing to pack his bags because he was getting ready to vanish into thin air. And somebody should have told the manager of Trump Tower to call the exterminator because there were about to be some rats in the building. June 9th of 2016 was the date the infamous Trump Tower meeting took place. And just like the George Papadopoulos portion of the Spygate saga, all was not as it seemed. The optics weren't good, but nothing illegal happened at this meeting, and Donald Trump Jr. released the email chain leading up to the meeting to the public. Donald Trump Jr. received an email from Rob Goldstone, a publicist he knew from a golf tournament, promising Russian dirt on Hillary if he took a meeting with some Russians. But the Russians in the meeting never provided any dirt on Hillary. Trump Jr.'s brother-in-law, Jared Kushner, left the meeting after 5 minutes, and Paul Manafort fell asleep. Instead of dirt, the Russians talked about adoption and getting Trump Sr. to repeal the Magnitsky Act. The Magnitsky Act placed sanctions on human rights violating Russian businessmen. In response to the sanctions, Russia stopped allowing Americans to adopt Russian children. About a year later, when the story came to light, the fake news media jumped all over this story and said this was the meeting that proved the Trump campaign colluded with Russia, or at the very least, Donald Trump Jr. attempted to collude with the Russians.
Some people have said this could be treason. For the love of God, treason is defined in the Constitution. This is not treason. One said, well, if you take things of tangible value under the campaign laws and treat information like that, then maybe you have a campaign contribution violation. Well, yeah, but we haven't seen that done. You could also treat it like a panda and say it's an endangered species violation. You know, this was a meeting where someone said they had evidence of a possible crime by the opponent of the Trump campaign. They met with this person. I think a lot of people in the city view that as naive. I think a lot of people say, my God, why didn't you use a surrogate, which is how it's done in Washington? But that itself is not a crime. The fact is campaigns and aides meet with foreign leaders and nationals all the time. They share information about trade and other issues. Sometimes they share information that runs against their opponent in a campaign. That is fairly routine.
They didn't ask any questions or do any kind of critical thinking. No one said, if Trump Sr. is really in bed with the Russians, why then would Putin send a Russian lawyer all the way to America without any of the dirt that was supposedly, quote, part of Russia and its government's support for Mr. Trump, unquote? If Putin says, hey, I'm sending a box full of stuff to show how much I support you, and then when you open that box, it's completely empty, wouldn't that actually prove that Putin doesn't support you and that you're not in league with him? This story doesn't make any sense. And the reason it doesn't make any sense is because those weren't regular Russians that entered Trump Tower. Former Soviet counterintelligence officer Rinat Akhmetshin and attorney Natalia Veselnitskaya were two of the Russians in that meeting. Veselnitskaya was no Trump fan, and Akhmetshin disliked the entire Trump family, had met Hillary Clinton, was friendly with many of her campaign members, and his lawyer and personal advisor, Edward Lieberman, just so happened to be married to Bill Clinton's former Deputy Chief of Staff and close Hillary Clinton confidant, Evelyn Lieberman. Rinat Akhmetshin and attorney Natalia Veselnitskaya were both working with the same man. That man had been working with Veselnitskaya for years, assisting Russia's efforts to help overturn the Magnitsky Act. That man met with Veselnitskaya for dinner the day before and the day after the Trump Tower meeting, and Veselnitskaya told NBC that he prepared her talking points for the meeting. That man was none other than Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS.
Well, the Russians that are involved in the Trump Tower, the infamous Trump Tower meeting in New York, I call them the Fusion GPS Russians. Fusion GPS was the company that was working for the Clinton campaign and the Democrats, and somehow Glenn Simpson meets with them before and after, and he's actually, these are Russians that he's doing work for. I mean, come on.
Even though he met Veselnitskaya the day before and the day after, Simpson later testified that he was completely unaware of the most important meeting his clients would ever attend for a project Fusion GPS received over $500,000 for. It's equally funny that Simpson, who spent over a decade vilifying Paul Manafort for working with the pro-Russian president of the Ukraine, Viktor Yanukovych, while Simpson himself was working directly with the Russians to destroy U.S. legislation. Veselnitskaya had previously been in the country through a special dispensation known as immigration parole. Her attempt to renew her immigration parole was blocked by a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York, Preet Bharara. Bharara denied her immigration parole in March of 2016, stating that she did not need to return to the United States to work on a legal case she was involved in unless she was serving in the capacity of a witness, which she was not. Someone had Obama's State Department override Bharara's decision and allowed a self-professed informant for the Russian government
информатора. То есть я являюсь адвокатом, и я являюсь информатором.
To enter the country on a B1/B2 non-immigrant visa in June of 2016, just in time for the Trump Tower meeting. These Russians were either Putin's worst agents because they were unable to deliver a simple message, all while being spearheaded by criminal mastermind Rob Goldstone, who didn't even know that there was no such thing as the Crown Prosecutor of Russia. Or there was no derogatory information provided about Hillary Clinton because these Russian agents were also Fusion GPS operatives working on behalf of the Clinton campaign and the DNC to set the Trump campaign up.
The Trump Tower meeting was an obvious setup where you had Fusion GPS, the Clinton campaign operative machine, that was involved in that entire setup. There's numerous examples like this, so I don't think people should forget this. This is a scandal.
George Papadopoulos, Carter Page, Sam Clovis, Donald Trump Jr., Jared Kushner, and Paul Manafort had all been approached by suspicious operatives, and now it was Roger Stone's and Trump campaign advisor Michael Caputo's turn. Michael Caputo received a phone call from Henry Greenberg offering information on Hillary Clinton. Caputo forwarded Greenberg over to Roger Stone, who met with him on May 29th of 2016.
At this very brief meeting, Mr. Greenberg lays it on me that he has information damaging to Hillary Clinton, and he only wants $2 million for it.
Stone laughed Greenberg out of the office. Later, Caputo started researching Greenberg and made some rather startling discoveries.
A dangerous, violent Russian criminal who'd spent 13 years in jail in Russia and the United States for gun crimes in the United States, call me up and offer me dirt on Hillary Clinton. I find out, shortly thereafter, by hiring a private investigator, that the guy had been working for the FBI as an informant for 17 years. In fact, was in the country on FBI informant visas for most of that time. And by the way, he's here now. well. And they did the same thing to Papadopoulos. Drop in some information that they can try and get out later and say that I got that from a Russian.
What we've seen and heard from the president in the past 5 days may be the biggest lie of all. Repeatedly, and with no facts to back him up, making the outrageous claim that the so-called deep state spied on his campaign.
This phony baloney story about a spy on the campaign. To call them a conspiracy theory is to give them too much credit.
The notion that somehow the FBI planted someone inside the campaign to spy on the campaign is just not true.
This unproven narrative of a spy being placed inside his campaign.
Did the intelligence community spy on President Trump and his campain?
No, we did not.
Was it spying?
Well, yeah, I guess it meets the dictionary definition of surveillance or spying. They were spying on a term I don't particularly like, but on what the Russians were doing, trying to understand, were the Russians infiltrating, trying to gain access, trying to gain leverage and influence.
So why doesn't he like
what they do?
So why doesn't he like that? He should be happy though.
Well, he should be.
That's General Clapper on The View. President Trump firing back on Twitter. Quote, "No, James Clapper, I am not happy. Spying on a campaign would be illegal and a scandal to boot." He added, quote, "Even Clapper, world's dumbest former intelligence head who has the problem of lying a lot, used the word spy when describing the illegal activities."
I'll tell you, when we finally find out the truth about this, Director Clapper and the rest of them are going to be wearing some orange suits.
I've known Jim Clapper for years. I am astounded how bad he looks now. I'm astounded how dishonest and incompetent he looks. He was the director of national intelligence. What do you think he was in charge of doing? He was in charge of spying.
Your response?
Well, I sure hope I get to go to the assisted living wing with that orange suit, I guess.
Number 6, fake a defensive briefing to spy on candidate Trump and General Michael Flynn. In 2008, when it began to appear as if Russia was influencing members of John McCain's campaign, George W. Bush's FBI warned McCain so he could dismiss those members. And in 2013, Dianne Feinstein received a warning from Obama's FBI that one of her staff members was being courted by China, which allowed her to get rid of the guy. Donald Trump was afforded no such courtesy.
If you really believed that Trump's campaign was being infiltrated by Russians, why didn't you tell him so he could do something about it?
Excellent question.
To have the Trump campaign collected on is extraordinarily hard because in most circumstances, a U.S. citizen, if you're a U.S. citizen and you're being targeted by the Russians, you are obligated to be told. The FBI is obligated to tell you you're a target because you've done nothing wrong. You're a U.S. citizen.
According to the IG report, in the spring of 2016, Comey, McCabe, and Loretta Lynch toyed with the idea of briefing then-candidate Trump. But ultimately, Bill Priestap, the assistant director of the FBI's counterintelligence division, decided against it. Instead of warning candidate Trump, Andrew McCabe and FBI General Counsel James Baker sent FBI agents to spy on him and his pick for National Security Advisor, General Michael Flynn, in August of 2016.
And I also want you to know a counterintelligence investigation is not a criminal investigation. They're not trying to solve a crime. They're trying to stop foreign powers from interfering in America. That a counterintelligence investigation is designed to protect Americans from foreign influence. Did they ever try to protect Donald Trump from foreign influence?
They did not brief him, and we lay out on page 55.
As a matter of fact, when they went in and gave a vanilla briefing, the Russians are out there, you better beware. Didn't they have an FBI agent do a 302 on the defensive briefing itself?
They sent one of the supervisory agents from the Crossfire Hurricane team to the briefing, and that agent prepared a report to the file of the briefing.
About what Trump said.
About what Mr. Trump said and what Mr. Flynn said. So the agent was actually doing the briefing, but also using it for the purpose of investigation. We have very significant concerns about that.
If this doesn't bother you, you hate Trump way too much.
Number 7, verify and submit lies to the court. Comey had famously referred to the dossier as salacious and unverified. And McCabe had testified that but for the dossier, there would have been no FISA warrant.
Andy McCabe told us when we deposed him that but for the dossier, they wouldn't have got the warrant. The director of the FBI, who's been fired, said it was salacious and unverified when they took it to a court, a secret court, to get a warrant to spy on Carter Page, who was associated with the Trump campaign.
FBI and department officials told us the Steele reporting, quote, pushed the FISA proposal over the line, close quote, in terms of establishing probable cause, and we concluded that the Steele reporting played a central and essential role in the decision to seek a FISA order.
We said that made up the bulk of the FISA. We were made fun of, we were told that was wrong, that we were lying, when in fact we were 100% right.
Well, turns out the FBI made a giant spreadsheet to keep track of the Steele dossier's lies. The spreadsheet showed that more than 90% of the dossier's claims were either wrong, unverifiable, or just random mess from Google searches. And yes, the FBI knew this before they took it to a secret court and used it as the bulk of the information to get a FISA warrant so they could spy on the Trump campaign. Sometimes I really wonder what they were thinking.
Michael Cohen goes to Prague to pay off Russian hackers. There is a PP tape on Trump.
I don't suppose it's occurred to anyone in this room that if we're going to be illegally spying on a presidential campaign, that maybe, just maybe, we shouldn't leave gigantic pieces of evidence of our crimes out in the open for everyone to see?
President Trump has been a Russian asset for 8 years. Michael Cohen's wife is Russian. Igor Sechin offered Carter Page part of a $12 billion bribe.
Out of curiosity, what exactly have we proved from the dossier?
A Russian diplomat returned home to Russia.
A Russian diplomat went back home to Russia. Whoa. Well, excellent detective work there, guy. I'm sure next you'll be telling me the grass is green and the sky is blue. You've left us in an undefendable position. I don't think we're going to be able to find someone dumb enough to go on TV and support us on these ridiculous claims.
Russian collusion. They colluded. The basic thesis of this dossier, that the Trump campaign was in on it, little pieces of that, little checkable pieces of that have been falling into place almost every day now. This guy from the embassy, Mikhail Kalugin, he really did get called home from the Russian embassy, and now he really is back in Moscow. His name was misspelled in the dossier. And so far, it is us as American citizens, it is us in the press who are connecting the dots on this story, who are figuring this out.
You are fake news.
The Russian regime has been cultivating, supporting, and assisting Trump for at least 5 years. Aim endorsed by Putin has been to encourage splits and divisions in Western alliance.
The bullcrap detector is measuring off the charts. Comey, you've got to stop lying before it's too late. I'm getting a new job. I've had enough of this shit. If at this point you're saying to yourself, I thought that in America you couldn't have secret courts where someone who doesn't like you can make up a bunch of lies and then get the government to spy on you. If that's what you were thinking, then you were correct. You can't do that legally. The Woods procedures are designed to protect American citizens from that exact scenario. The Woods procedures essentially state that any information submitted to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court has to be verified, and exculpatory evidence or evidence that could be used to help clear your name must be included. But the dossier was a bunch of baloney. The court was never told that Hillary Clinton's campaign and the DNC paid for it, and exculpatory evidence was not included, like how Carter Page had worked with the FBI from 2013 to 2016 to help bust up a Russian spy ring, and how George Papadopoulos told the Walrus that he wasn't working with the Russians. To ensure that Woods procedures are followed, the law requires high-level FBI and DOJ figures to sign off on a Woods file. The people that swore to the court that they were submitting a verified warrant application included FBI Director James Comey, FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein, Acting Attorney General Dana Puente, and Deputy Attorney General Sally Yates did too, because she was too mean to die when the barn fell on her.
The agents and supervisory agents did not follow or even appear to know certain basic requirements in the Woods procedures. We found that investigators failed to meet their basic obligations of ensuring that the FISA applications were scrupulously accurate. We identified significant inaccuracies and omissions in each of the 4 applications, 7 in the first application and a total of 17 by the final renewal application. And the FISA applications made it appear as though the evidence supporting probable cause was stronger than was actually the case. And as a result, the surveillance of Carter Page continued even as the FBI gathered information that weakened the assessment of probable cause and made the FISA applications less accurate.
As Horowitz stated, there are a whopping 17 errors and omissions in the FISA warrant. And now I'm going to show you how they pretended to verify this mess. Team Hillary used 3 methods to verify the dossier, relying on the reputation of Christopher Steele, circular reporting, and circular intelligence. The FBI's philosophy was that since Christopher Steele had worked with them in the past, the information he provided was reliable. But the FISA warrant, which was initially approved in October of 2016, had to be renewed every 90 days, and it was renewed 3 times. By the first renewal, the FBI, that was paying Christopher Steele, fired him for leaking his relationship with them to the media. The FBI continued to pretend that the man that they had to fire for being untrustworthy was a credible source. The second method that was used for verification, circular reporting, was even more alarming. Circular reporting means using a single source for the basis of a report, but making it seem like there are multiple sources. Glenn Simpson introduced Christopher Steele to Yahoo News reporter Michael Isikoff in September of 2016. That same month, Isikoff wrote an article titled U.S. Intelligence Officials Probe Ties Between Trump Advisor and Kremlin. And the FBI submitted the article that Christopher Steele and his information was the source of to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. Team Hillary used Christopher Steele's lies to corroborate Christopher Steele's lies.
There really is no verification other than media reports that were generated by reporters who received the dossier. So the bottom line is the dossier has never been independently confirmed. It was used to get a warrant. They knew the author of the dossier was on the Democratic Party payroll. He hated Trump. They got the warrant anyway. Most Americans should be upset about that.
Then they told the American public that it was perfectly okay to lie to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court.
Let's go with some of the other nonsense that you're seeing now. You actually have people out there in the media, mainstream media, that are now talking about, well, the regs don't necessarily say that you have to verify all the evidence. Well, look, I think that's crazy talk.
The third method, circular intelligence, may have been the worst of all. Circular intelligence occurs when unconfirmed information is reported by one agency or analyst, and another agency or analyst uses that unconfirmed information as independent proof that their own information has been confirmed by another source.
Chris Steele had direct access to the FBI. He was handing them parts of the dossier. Why did they also want to run it through Bruce Orr at the Justice Department? Seems to me to create weight and credibility behind a document that was completely false. If you can now go tell the press and tell other people, oh, a senior Department of Justice official is also talking about the dossier and also passing it on to the FBI, it gives it weight when in fact it was completely a uncredible, unverified document and a bunch of garbage.
Yeah. Team Hillary took the same Russian lies and dropped them into various parts of the government and the media to give their fairy tale legitimacy. The dossier information entered the CIA through Brennan. Brennan took the dossier information and briefed each of the Gang of 8 members separately from August through September of 2016. The Gang of 8 is a group of congressmen that are briefed on classified intelligence matters. They are comprised of the majority and minority leaders in the House and Senate, along with the chairs and ranking minority members of the House and Senate Intelligence Committees. This briefing triggered Gang of 8 member Harry Reid to write a letter to Comey demanding he open an investigation into the Trump campaign. The New York Times reported on Reid's letter several days later. Senator Rand Paul stated that Brennan insisted that dossier information be included in the intelligence community assessment called the ICA that was given to Obama. The IG report revealed that Comey and McCabe pushed for dossier information to be included in the ICA for Obama. FBI agent Michael Gaeta served as the FBI's handler for Christopher Steele. Gaeta's first dossier-related meeting with Steele took place on July 5th of 2016, where Steele gave Gaeta the first memo he wrote. Gaeta subsequently provided a copy of that memo to Victoria Nuland of the State Department. Gaeta would continue to have meetings with Steele and pass his information to his FBI colleagues. Additionally, Steele met with numerous members of the media before the election, and if that wasn't bad enough, court papers confirmed that Fusion GPS paid 3 journalists from June of 2016 until February of 2017. The media played their part in the Spygate saga by printing fake news stories about Trump and Russia before America's citizens went to the polls in an attempt to influence the 2016 presidential election. Perkins Coie partner Michael Sussman passed dossier information to FBI General Counsel James Baker. Once again, Perkins Coie was the firm that the Clinton campaign and the DNC paid to hire Fusion GPS to write the dossier in the first place. Sussman later leaked the information, the Alpha Bank portion of the Spygate saga, to the media. Baker would go on and testify that he also received parts of the dossier that the FBI didn't have from Mother Jones reporter David Korn. On October 31st of 2016, Korn published a story anonymously quoting Steele as a confidential source for the FBI, and the FBI fired Steele for the disclosure on November 1st of 2016. But later that same month, the FBI asked Bruce Orr to re-establish contact with Steele, which Orr maintained, at least through November of 2017. Dossier information was funneled to DOJ member Bruce Orr through 3 separate people: his wife Nellie Orr, Christopher Steele, and Glenn Simpson. Bruce Orr passed that information to FBI Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, Lisa Page, and later Peter Strzok. Then Orr shared the information with senior-level DOJ members, 2 of which, Zainab Ahmad and Andrew Weissman, would later work for Special Counsel Robert Mueller. Orr went on and testified that in July of 2016, he warned that the information from Steele was unverified, paid for by the Clinton campaign, his wife worked for Fusion GPS, and Christopher Steele was desperate that Donald Trump not become the president. Sir Andrew Wood worked as a contractor for Orbis. Orbis was the research company that Christopher Steele owned. Wood was also the former British ambassador to Russia. Wood made sure he met with Senator John McCain and McCain's aide David Kramer. On November 19th of 2016, McCain's aide passed the information to 14 different journalists, including Mother Jones reporter David Korn, who would go on and publish the dossier in full on January 10th of 2017. McCain passed the dossier information to Victoria Nuland at the State Department and Comey in December of 2016, but both of them had already been briefed. There was also a second dossier. It was put together by longtime Clinton operative Cody Shearer.
Well, Cody is one of the card-carrying original members of the Black Ops team that Hillary developed over the years to chase down and blackmail the women with whom Bill was involved to cow them into silence. Kathleen Willey very explicitly mentions him as part of that.
The second dossier echoed the claims of the original. Shearer shared his dossier with the media and another longtime Clinton operative, Sidney "Sid Vicious" Blumenthal. Blumenthal had been part of the Clinton machine since the 90s, and was known as the Clintons' political hitman because he smeared people that got in the Clintons' way. Blumenthal was so bad that Obama banned him from serving in his administration because Blumenthal was the father of the birther movement.
Sidney Blumenthal, a longtime Clinton confidant and friend, was peddling the birther lie in 2008, according to the former Washington bureau chief of the McClatchy News Group, Sidney Blumenthal, who was banned from joining the Obama administration by the Obama White House precisely because he trafficked in a lot of questionable information about Barack Obama.
Blumenthal passed the second dossier information to Jonathan Weiner at the State Department. Weiner gave dossier number 2 information to Christopher Steele. Christopher Steele then gave his dossier information to Weiner. Weiner was also in contact with Glenn Simpson in September of 2016. Weiner passed the Steele dossier information to the DOJ and took it back to the State Department, where Secretary of State John Kerry was briefed. On October 11th of 2016, Christopher Steele personally briefed the Department of State. Deputy Assistant Secretary of State Kathleen Kavalak took notes on the meeting and forwarded them to the FBI. Her notes reveal that the FBI knew before they submitted the FISA warrant application that Christopher Steele had hinted that his client was the DNC and they needed to get the dossier released to the public before the election. Kavalak also noted Christopher Steele mentioned a Russian operation being run out of the Russian consulate in Miami. Kavalak then wrote that it is important to note that there is no Russian consulate in Miami. The FBI, without a doubt, was aware that the man they were paying was also being paid by the Democrats, was politically motivated, and was presenting false information.
But for the dossier, there would be no warrant against Carter Page. The meeting on October the 11th was 10 days before the FISA warrant application. So the FBI was on notice that their confidential informant went to the Department of State to urge the Department of State to take the dossier and leak it to the public to affect the election. That's about as sick as it gets.
Right now, you may be wondering about where Christopher Steele got all that bad information from that was spreading through Washington, D.C. like a virus. Fortunately, Steele revealed 2 of his sources to Kathleen Kavalak at the State Department, and she recorded the names of his sources in her notes. Steele's sources were none other than the former director of Russian intelligence, Vyacheslav Trubnikov, and former Deputy Prime Minister and Putin's personal advisor, Vladislav Surkov. Surkov is known as the Grey Cardinal, Putin's Rasputin, and Putin's puppet master for his ability to deceive and manipulate people from behind the scenes. So Steele's sources are basically Putin's best friends because, I'm sure they'll tell the truth.
The Russians saw the Democrats coming. They set this all up. They knew this would be a poison pill, and they set up tripwires on both sides. So ultimately, no matter who got the information, how it was used, they come out on top. And the Democrats were too stupid to both understand it's illegal and too stupid to understand the third and fourth order effects of the damage this would cause.
On October 21st, 2016, the FBI used one party's opposition research document as the basis to go to a secret court to get a warrant to spy on the other party's campaign. That happened. Democrat National Committee, the Clinton campaign, paid Perkins Coie law firm, who hired Fusion GPS, who then hired a foreigner, Christopher Steele, who did what? Talked to Russians and put together this salacious, unverified document that became the basis to get a warrant to spy on the Trump campaign. They did it. And when they went to the court, they didn't tell them important things like who paid for it. They didn't tell them that Christopher Steele had already told the FBI and the Justice Department that he was, quote, desperate to stop Trump.
Team Hillary understood they were about to submit a bunch of lies to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. But submitting the lies to the court was easier said than done because Team Hillary was in a race against the clock with Admiral Rogers. Admiral Rogers discovered during Plan A that the FBI had illegally given private contractors access to raw FISA data, and he had ordered a compliance audit. Team Hillary knew they had to submit the Carter Page FISA warrant application to the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court before Admiral Rogers finished his audit and alerted the court to his findings. And for his heroic efforts to expose government corruption, Director of National Intelligence Clapper and Defense Secretary Ash Carter recommended to Obama that Admiral Rogers be fired. But Obama didn't do it. The Attorney General and the Director of National Intelligence are required to provide the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court with annual certifications stating that the intelligence community has been and will be following minimization and targeting procedures. On September 26th of 2016, Assistant Attorney General and Head of the Department of Justice's National Security Division, John Carlin, submitted the government's proposed 2016 702 certifications. Carlin was aware of the January 7, 2016 Inspector General report noting irregularities with the 702 queries, as well as Admiral Rogers' compliance audit. But Carlin hid that information from the court and announced that he was resigning the next day. Lisa Page would later testify that Carlin was briefed on the FBI's investigation activities by Andrew McCabe. Carlin's lies by omission allowed the Carter-Page FISA warrant to be approved by the court without any additional scrutiny on October 21st of 2016, just 3 days before Admiral Rogers informed the court of the FISA violations. And while Team Hillary may have won that battle, the war was far from over. It's now election night, November 8th of 2016. Donald Trump has just become the 45th president of the United States. And Hillary, who's supposed to be making her concession speech, was nowhere to be found. Panic was setting in on Team Hillary as they realized that all the laws they had broken were going to come to light. As President of the United States, Donald Trump would now have access to the intelligence they had, and then some. They realized they needed to come up with something fast so they didn't all go to jail. The next day, Hillary Clinton finally emerged and gave a concession speech, the likes of which the American public had not seen before. If they were drinking their own spiked Kool-Aid when they came up with Plan B, then I believe they were imbibing some of that milk of the poppy when Plan C was created. They threw everything but the kitchen sink at Trump, and the more corrupt they were, the louder they screamed. America hadn't seen Democrats this mad at a Republican president since Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves.
When he was elected, there was an effort to sue 3 states for the voting machines and nullify the election. There was a sustained effort to give the Steele dossier to the electors and to persuade the electors not to vote according to their constitutional mandates. Then there was almost immediately 60 representatives that voted for impeachment the week he was inaugurated. Then there was an effort to sue on the emoluments clause of the Constitution to remove him. Finally, there was Rob Rosenstein and Andrew McCabe meeting to see if they could poll cabinet members to remove him.
But thank goodness Admiral Rogers was still on the job. Admiral Rogers visited Trump Tower on November 17th of 2016 without informing the Obama administration.
He visits Trump in Trump Tower. He probably goes up there and says, "Brother, they're spying on you, like right now." And what happens the very next day? Donald Trump evacuates Trump Tower and goes to Bedminster, New Jersey. All of a sudden, people start resigning from the federal government after that. You know who also resigns? Bob Hannigan. Bob Hannigan is the head of the GCHQ, which is the British NSA. He says, "Oh, I'm leaving for family reasons." Family reasons? You're leaving because Donald Trump got elected.
Obama's final days in office were dedicated to trying to stop the now President-elect Trump. Lisa Page had texted Peter Strzok back on September 2nd of 2016, "Oh, Pumpkin, the POTUS wants to know everything we're doing." The Obama team listened in on a meeting in Trump Tower between the Crown Prince of the United Arab Emirates and senior-level Trump officials on December 15th of 2016. Susan Rice did the unmasking.
The president, his associates, their names could have been bandied about by foreign officials. They could have been picked up in incidental collection.
Yes, they could have.
Correct?
That is possible. Indeed.
And you could have asked for those names of American number 1, American number 2, however it's identified, to be unmasked so you would know how significant it was.
That's exactly right.
A shocking revelation to tell you about right now. Information regarding the unmasking of Trump campaign members by former Obama National Security Advisor Susan Rice is stored at the Obama Library and will be under lock and key for 5 years.
On December 29th of 2016, President Obama imposed sanctions on Russia for election interference, which triggered Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak to call Trump's soon-to-be National Security Advisor, Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. The Obama team spied on that call too, and then they committed a felony-level leak of that information to the press. Under Obama's leadership, Team Hillary had gathered tons of information on the Trump team, and they were going to keep on renewing that Carter Page FISA warrant through June of 2017. With mere days left in the Obama administration, they rushed to find a way to disseminate the information that they had already collected to as many people as possible. They also wanted a mechanism by which the information that would be collected in the future could also be spread around, maximizing the number of people that had access to the information on the Trump team associates would make it much easier for people to leak without getting caught. And that's why on January 3rd of 2017, in the twilight of the Obama administration, James Clapper and Loretta Lynch were scurrying around making last-minute changes to Section 2.3 of Executive Order 12333. Previously, the NSA controlled raw data. But now, any of the other 16 intelligence agencies could access raw data much easier and without the privacy protections that had previously been required.
It's increased 16-fold the number of people that would have access to the communications. And what that does is it almost creates a shadow government. You have all these people that are not agreeing with the president, President Trump's position, so it just festers more leaks.
Do you agree with
if they had a justification for this, wonderful. Why didn't they do it 8 years ago, 4 years ago, 3 years ago?
Yeah.
They wait till 17 days left. President Obama, James Clapper, Loretta Lynch should be held accountable for this.
And for anyone that wanted to make the case that Section 2.3 was changed solely for national security reasons, Evelyn Farkas, Obama's own Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for Russia, Ukraine, and Eurasia, put that myth to bed when she explained why there had been so many leaks.
I was urging my former colleagues and, frankly speaking, the people on the Hill, get as much information as you can, get as much intelligence as you can before President Obama leaves the administration. The Trump folks, if they found out how we knew what we knew about the Trump staff's dealing with Russians, that they would try to compromise those sources and methods. That's why you have the leaking.
Exactly.
People are worried.
Brennan and Clapper produced a series of reports designed to push the Russia narrative. The joint statement from the Department of Homeland Security and the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, which was released on October 7th of 2016, Grizzly Steppe on December 29th of 2016, and the Intelligence Community Assessment on Russian Election Interference, or ICA, on January 6th of 2017. On March 5th of 2018, Admiral Rogers sent a classified letter to House Intelligence Committee Chairman Devin Nunes, clarifying that in late December of 2016, a 2-page summary of the Steele dossier was added as an appendix to the ICA draft, and that his consideration of the appendix was part of the overall ICA review and approval process. This claim was further cemented by Horowitz in the IG report when he noted that James Comey and Andrew McCabe pushed for the dossier information to be included in the ICA, which it was.
Do you know if the Bureau ever relied on the Steele dossier as part of any court filings, applications, petitions, pleadings?
I have no awareness.
Did the CIA rely on it?
No.
Why not?
because we didn't. It wasn't part of the corpus of intelligence information that we had. It was not in any way used as a basis for the intelligence community assessment that was done. It was not.
The decision to include dossier information in the ICA lent credibility to the dossier and helped promote unfounded fears of Russian collusion. Clapper blamed Obama for the mess.
If it weren't for President Obama, we might not have done the intelligence community assessment that we did that set off a whole sequence of events which are still unfolding today, notably Special Counsel Mueller's investigation. President Obama is responsible for that, and it was he who tasked us to do that intelligence community assessment in the first place.
It's worth noting that Admiral Rogers publicly dissented from the findings of the ICA and only gave the report a moderate confidence level rating. On January 5th of 2017, intelligence community chiefs briefed President Obama on the ICA. Following the briefing, Obama held a meeting with Joe Biden, Susan Rice, Sally Yates, and James Comey, where they discussed the dossier. This meeting was memorialized in a suspicious-sounding email Susan Rice sent herself on Inauguration Day. The email mentioned multiple times that President Obama wanted to proceed, quote, by the book, unquote, because that's how innocent people talk. And Obama wanted to know if there was any reason they could not share information fully as it related to Russia with the Trump transition team. Rice seemingly wrote this email to protect herself in the event someone asked her why she violated long-standing civic norms by concealing facts relating to national security and Russia from General Flynn, who was her counterpart in the incoming administration. This email gave her the ability to say that President Obama ordered it.
I must say, I want to thank Susan Rice for being so stupid and so arrogant to write that email on January 20th, because that's Exhibit A for that Barack Obama knew all about this from start to finish and was more than happy to have the civil rights of massive numbers of Americans violated so he could get Donald Trump.
In an interview he gave to CNN, Comey declared that Clapper and Brennan told him to brief President-elect Trump only on the perverted stuff in the dossier. Comey did exactly that on January 6th of 2017. According to the IG report, immediately following the meeting, Comey was given a secure FBI laptop in the car so he could type his version of what President-elect Trump had said while the vehicle moved. Comey then had a video conference with Andy McCabe, Comey's chief of staff James Rybicki, and General Counsel James Baker, along with other top Crossfire Hurricane officials, because the group had decided before Comey's meeting with President-elect Trump that Comey use it as an opportunity to spy on him. Members of the media had had the dossier for a while and wanted to report on it, but they hadn't because it was total garbage, and they didn't want to embarrass themselves by publishing Bat Boy level smut. Comey knew this and even confessed to it in one of his memos. Media like CNN had them and were looking for a news hook. I said it was inflammatory stuff, that they would get killed for reporting straight up from source reports. The House Permanent Select Committee on Intelligence's report on Russian active measures revealed that Clapper admitted that he confirmed the existence of the dossier to the media. And one can also infer from the report that it was Clapper that told CNN's Jake Tapper about President-elect Trump being briefed on the dossier.
General Clapper, have you ever leaked information, classified or unclassified, to a member of the press?
Not wittingly or knowingly, as I said in my statement.
When the media heard from Clapper that the dossier was so important that high-level government officials were being briefed on it, they took it as a green light to publish dossier-related stories. 4 days after President-elect Trump was briefed by Comey on parts of the dossier, which was January 10th of 2017, CNN published an article titled, "Intel Chiefs Presented Trump with Claims of Russian Efforts to Compromise Him," and they read part of that article word for word on air.
Classified documents on Russian interference in the 2016 U.S. election presented last week to President Obama and to President-elect Trump included allegations that Russian operatives claimed to have compromising personal and financial information about Mr. Trump. These were based on memos compiled by a former British intelligence operative whose past work U.S. intelligence officials consider credible. The FBI is now investigating the credibility and accuracy of the allegations.
BuzzFeed published the dossier in full on the same day. This 1-2 punch skyrocketed the phony Russian collusion narrative into the American mainstream. Christopher Steele was not the originating source of any of the factual information in his reporting. Steele relied on a primary subsource for his information, who used his or her network of subsources to gather information that was then passed to Steele. According to the IG report, in January of 2017, right after the first Carter Page FISA warrant renewal, Steele's primary subsource told the FBI that the dossier was nothing but a bunch of lies.
Look, man, I saw this dossier for the first time when it came out in the media, just like everybody else did, okay? The stuff that Steele wrote is not even what I said. Steele exaggerated and lied all over the place. The PP tape, that was just rumor and speculation. And the guy that told me about Carter Page meeting with Igor Sechin never said that Sechin offered Carter Page a $12 billion bribe. Come on, man, $12 billion? That didn't sound funny to you? Aren't you supposed to be the head of intelligence or something?
Carter Page's role in the supposed $12 billion Rosneft bribe was the main dossier claim against him, and the FBI had proof that it was utter nonsense in January of 2017. Instead of canceling the Carter Page FISA warrant because the dossier played a central and essential role in obtaining the FISA warrant, the FBI told the FISA court that they found the primary subsource to be credible. But what the FBI didn't say was that the primary subsource was credible and truthful when he or she said that the dossier was hot garbage.
In the second and third renewals, the last two applications, they told the court that they had interviewed Steele's primary subsource, upon whom Steele relied in writing the reporting, and that they found the primary subsource to be credible. They did not tell the court or the department lawyers any of the information which would have allowed them to know that if you found the primary subsource credible, you couldn't have also found the Steele reporting credible.
Did they mislead the court?
That was misleading to the court.
In January 2017, the whole foundation for surveilling Carter Page collapses. Exculpatory information is ignored. They lie to the court about what the interview was all about. If you don't have a legal foundation to surveil somebody and you keep doing it, is that bad?
Absolutely.
Is that spying?
It's not. It's illegal surveillance. It's not court-authorized
whatever
surveillance.
Whatever illegal surveillance means, they did it. I hope this chapter in American history is never repeated. And finally, if you report that this 434-page report says lawful investigation with a few irregularities, you're doing a great disservice to the American people.
In a subsequent FBI interview, the primary subsource said that he/she made it clear to Steele that he/she had no proof to support statements from his/her subsources and that it was just talk. The subsource's information came from word of mouth and hearsay and conversations that they'd had with friends over beers, and that the PP tape information was just a bunch of jokes.
But I don't know whether the current president of the United States was with prostitutes peeing on each other in Moscow in 2013. It's possible, but I don't know.
If that wasn't bad enough, FBI lawyer Kevin Kleinsmith added his contribution to the mix. Strzok and Page weren't the only FBI employees that weren't smart enough to know not to use their work devices to brag about their wrongdoings. In a series of instant messages, Kleinsmith said things like, "I'm so stressed about what I could have done differently. Pence is stupid. My bleep bleep name is all over the legal documents investigating his staff. So who knows if that breaks to him what he's going to do. Viva la resistance." I mean, I really never liked the Republic anyway, and as I have initiated the destruction of the Republic, would you be so kind as to have a coffee with me this afternoon?
Mr. Kleinsmith, for example, I reported to him the death threats that I was getting based on these false stories in April 2017. And not only did he do nothing, but then they had more leaks and more subsequent terror threats, which was pushed by the deep state and their Democrat colleagues.
Kleinsmith's crimes culminated with the doctoring of an email from the CIA to the FBI that originally stated that Carter Page was a CIA asset. He changed it to say that Carter Page was not working as a CIA asset. Carter Page, a Naval Academy graduate, had achieved the rank of lieutenant in the Navy and had worked in military intelligence. He had been working with the CIA from 2008 to 2013, helping his country catch Russian spies. And the contacts that he made with Russians at the behest of the CIA were first made into false allegations in the Steele dossier and later knowingly used against him by the FBI to obtain a FISA warrant because the FBI learned back on or about January 17th of 2016 that Carter Page was a CIA asset. Carter Page was both a CIA asset and had assisted the FBI to help put Russian spy Evgeny Buryakov behind bars.
If you're telling the FISA court, hey, the fact that this guy, Carter Page, but the fact that he's talking to Russians, really suspicious, well, the fact that he's serving as a source for U.S. intelligence agents is pretty darn relevant to why he's talking to Russians, because we have lots of sources that are talking to bad guys, and when you don't tell the court that, you're deceiving the court. But it's worse than just deceiving the court. A lawyer at the FBI creates fraudulent evidence, alters an email, that is in turn used as the basis for a sworn statement to the court that the court relies on. Am I stating that accurately?
That's correct.
So the intelligence agency said this guy is a source, and he inserted this guy is not a source. This wasn't Jason Bourne. This was Beavis and Butthead.
The FBI knew all this was hogwash, and yet they still allowed anti-Trump fake news stories to spread like wildfire while they continued to spy on the president. President Trump's inauguration on January 20th of 2017 meant that both Brennan and Clapper were out of a job. When the curtain was finally pulled back, Brennan was revealed to still be a bloated windbag, just a smaller and weaker version of one. Next, Brennan did what any talking head that was full of hot air would do. He and his buddy Clapper got jobs as fake news commentators. Team Hillary's lies, in conjunction with the mainstream media's fake news stories, launched a whole series of investigations. Crossfire Hurricane had launched on July 31st of 2016, but that was just the beginning, because this was the case that launched 1,000 shifts.
Yes, there's ample evidence of collusion in plain sight. There's plenty of evidence of collusion or conspiracy in plain sight. You can see evidence in plain sight on the issue of collusion.
How do you respond to the suggestion made that you going out there before this report came out and saying that there's evidence of collusion, and then Mueller comes out and says, we don't find any evidence of conspiracy, that what you're saying and what you said is irresponsible?
Jake, what I've been saying all along is that the evidence that I'm concerned about is in plain sight.
The New York Times reported that between federal, state, and congressional authorities, there are a staggering 30 separate Trump-related investigations. But of course, there was no deep state conspiracy going on, because that would be crazy talk.
You better think again, Mr. President. You've been around for 13 months. We've been around since 1908. I know how this game is going to be played. We're going to win.
You take on the intelligence community, they have 6 ways from Sunday at getting back at you.
Let me give you one bottom line. As a former government official, government's going to kill this guy.
Yep, that's right. There was no deep state conspiracy going on, and General Flynn, well, he wasn't set up either. Michael Flynn was a highly decorated lieutenant general in the United States Army. Everyone thought he was super awesome. Everyone, that is. Except for the people on Team Hillary. Team Hillary knew they needed a pound of flesh to give the Russian collusion narrative some teeth, and so they set their sights on the beloved general. The same day the Steele dossier, which contained lies about General Flynn, was published in full on by BuzzFeed, which was on January 10th of 2017, Peter Strzok sent this text to Lisa Page.
Honey bunny, I'm sitting here with Bill watching CNN. A ton more out. We're discussing whether now that this is out, we can use it as a pretext to go interview some people. Oh, Lisa, I love you so much.
For the next several weeks, Team Hillary held multiple meetings to brainstorm tactics they could use against General Flynn to interrogate him over his benign phone call that he had back on December 29th with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak. Additionally, on January 10th of 2017, Clapper told David Ignatius at the Washington Post words to the effect of, "Take the kill shot on Flynn." 2 days later, the world became aware that Team Hillary committed a felony when they leaked General Flynn's December 29th phone call with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak to the Washington Post. Nothing illegal occurred during General Flynn's phone call, but the article questioned whether or not General Flynn had broken the law by violating the Logan Act. The Logan Act forbids citizens from negotiating with other nations on behalf of the United States without authorization. No one has ever been prosecuted under the Logan Act, and it hadn't even been used since 1852. The idea that an incoming national security advisor speaking with a foreign diplomat was some sort of crime was absolutely ridiculous.
But in fact, all of General Flynn's conversations with the Russian ambassador and everybody else were legal. So why did the FBI approach him? They knew what he said. They knew it was legal. The answer is they wanted to frame him, and they succeeded.
In an attempt to kill the Ignatius story, General Flynn stated that he had the campaign put out the response that he didn't discuss sanctions with Kislyak at all. That claim was later repeated by Vice President Mike Pence. General Flynn later admitted that this wasn't true, and ultimately he would resign a month later, stating, quote, "Unfortunately, because of the fast pace of events, I inadvertently briefed the Vice President-elect and others with incomplete information regarding my phone calls with the Russian ambassador," unquote. From court documents filed by General Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, on January 23rd, the day before the FBI interviewed General Flynn, Deputy Director Andrew McCabe, FBI General Counsel James Baker, Peter Strzok, Lisa Page, Trish Anderson, Jen Boone, and David Bowditch strategized to talk with Mr. Flynn in such a way as to keep from alerting him from understanding that he was being interviewed in a criminal investigation of which he was the target. Right before the meeting, Lisa Page had texted Peter Strzok,
"Oh, Pumpkin, I can feel my heart beating harder. I'm so stressed about all the ways this has the potential to go fully off the rails."
The following day, at 12:30 p.m., McCabe called Flynn and asked him if it was okay for 2 agents to come by and talk to him in 2 hours. McCabe also told Flynn it was better if there were no White House lawyers present. Comey bragged on TV about how he deliberately discarded FBI and DOJ rules by not alerting the White House counsel's office that he was sending agents over to interview President Trump's national security advisor.
The FBI wanted to send agents into the White House itself to interview a senior official. You would work through the White House counsel, and there'd be discussions and approvals and who would be there. And I thought it's early enough. Let's just send a couple guys over.
It's extremely concerning. It's outrageous government misconduct. The agents deliberately calculated and met to plan and strategize how to ambush interview General Flynn without letting him know he was officially under any kind of criminal investigation, to keep him relaxed. And they wanted to be seen as allies when in fact they knew exactly what he had said in his conversations, and they intended to create a situation in which anything he said could be used against him later as a false statement without any warnings to that effect whatsoever.
Peter Strzok and Joe Pienka were the FBI agents that were sent to interview General Flynn on January 24th of 2017. Following the interrogation, McCabe said that Strzok and Pienka didn't think that Flynn was lying during the interview.
And he did not tell them false information. Some of it may have been paused. It may have been nuanced. He did not lie. And indeed, the agents who actual 302s are available said he didn't lie.
According to General Flynn's attorney, Sidney Powell, on January 30th of 2017, the DOJ, in an internal memo, cleared General Flynn of being a Russian agent, and the documentation existed that showed that then FBI Deputy Director McCabe ruled out Logan Act charges against Flynn in January or February of 2017. You may be asking, how did we go from everyone saying that General Flynn was telling the truth to General Flynn pleading guilty to one count of lying to the FBI? Well, General Flynn took a plea deal in part because he ran out of money and had to sell his home. Additionally, Rod Rosenstein authorized Mueller to go after his son, Michael Flynn Jr., who had a newborn baby at home. General Flynn was worried that his family would be SWAT-teamed, just like Roger Stone and Paul Manafort's families had been. So General Flynn fell on his sword to keep them all out of harm's way. And General Flynn didn't lie to the FBI. They just made it seem like he did. Peter Strzok and Joe Pienka recorded their version of what General Flynn said in an FBI summary memo that is called a 302. A 302 is an utterly ridiculous format that the FBI uses to record what happens in interviews and interrogations. Instead of recording conversations, because we have, like technology and stuff, FBI agents take notes of questions and answers and then go back and later turn those notes into a summary memo. This format is prone to human error, and if you testify to something other than their flawed recollection, you can be charged with lying to the FBI. Not recording interviews gives FBI agents the ability to make up whatever they want in order to frame people, and that is exactly what they did to General Flynn. First of all, the 302s were hidden from General Flynn's defense team, which violated the Brady Rule. The Brady Rule is a pretrial discovery rule that was established in 1963 by the United States Supreme Court in Brady v. Maryland. The Brady Rule requires that the prosecution must turn over all exculpatory evidence to the defendant in a criminal case. Exculpatory evidence is evidence that might exonerate the defendant. There were at least 6 versions of the Flynn 302. The original one, that should be dated around the same day as the January 24, 2017 interview, still has not been produced. Subsequent ones that have been produced are dated February 10th of 2017, February 11th of 2017, February 14th of 2017, February 15th of 2017, and May 31st of 2017. They changed his 302 again and again and again and again until it said exactly what they wanted it to. We know, thanks to court documents filed by Sidney Powell, that Peter Strzok and Joe Pienka's original handwritten notes taken during the interview didn't line up with the information in General Flynn's 302. Additional questions and answers that were not in the original notes were added weeks and months after the initial interview took place. And the government had also gotten Strzok and Pienka's notes mixed up.
They added a definitive statement that General Flynn did not say something that he had said, and another statement that he had elicited some responses to questions about Ambassador Kislyak, what he had said in response, and there's nothing in the notes that supports that whatsoever. It's made up out of whole cloth. I would encourage everyone to look at the exhibits for themselves.
On February 10th of 2017, the news broke, attributed to senior intelligence officials, that Mr. Flynn had discussed sanctions with Ambassador Kislyak, contrary to what Vice President Pence had said on television previously. Overnight, the most substantive changes were made to the Flynn 302. Those changes added an unequivocal statement that Flynn stated he did not, in response to whether Mr. Flynn had asked Kislyak to vote in a certain manner or slow down the UN vote. This is a deceptive manipulation because, as the notes of the agents show, Mr. Flynn was not even sure he had spoken to Russia/Kislyak on this issue. He had talked to dozens of countries. Second, they added, or Kislyak described any Russian response to a request by Flynn. That question and answer do not appear in the notes, yet it was made into a criminal offense. The typed version of the highly unusual deliberative 302 by that date already included an entire section from whole cloth that also serves as a criminal charge in the information and purported factual basis regarding Russia's response to any request by Flynn. The draft also shows that the agents moved a sentence to make it seem to be an answer to a question it was not. The final 302, dated May 31st of 2017, had even more additions. Notes by both agents state that Mr. Flynn does not remember making 4 to 5 calls to Ambassador Kislyak from the Dominican Republic, where he was on vacation, but that if he did so, it was because phone service was poor and he kept getting dropped. I don't remember making 4 to 5 calls. If I did, lousy place to call. The final 302 states the opposite. Flynn remembered making 4 to 5 calls that day about this issue, but that the Dominican Republic was a difficult place to make a call as he kept having connectivity issues. This dramatically demonstrates the wrong-headedness of allowing a 302 to create a federal felony. The notes provide no support for a chunk of the 302 that purports to provide a factual basis for the plea. 2 out of the 4 alleged false statements in the statement of offense are based on what the agents claim Mr. Flynn said or did not say about the response of the Russian ambassador on 2 separate issues. Even if we assume the skimpy, vague, and ambiguous notes correctly represent anything the agents might claim, the notes provide no support for a question or an answer about the Russian ambassador's response, either to the UN vote or the sanctions. The FBI totally just kept making stuff up months and months and months after the initial interview. And guess who was helping with the editing? Lisa Page.
We knew from early on in 2017 that Michael Flynn did not lie to the FBI. We actually put that in our report. It didn't come out until 2018 after Flynn had already pled. And for some reason, it was redacted. We had to fight in order to get that unredacted. There were several of us as witnesses. We also told the highest levels of DOJ that we had been briefed by the FBI that Flynn didn't lie to the FBI.
He did not lie, and in fact, the FBI knew it. Michael Flynn was framed in order to get at Donald Trump. Sally Yates, James Comey, Peter Strzok, Andy McCabe all planned it. What you are watching play out in an American courtroom is one of the most disgraceful events in American criminal justice.
With General Flynn being effectively neutralized, Team Hillary next put a bullseye on President Trump's Attorney General, Jeff Sessions. The Washington Post reported on March 1st of 2017 that Attorney General Sessions met with Russian Ambassador Sergei Kislyak at least 2 times in 2016. Team Hillary then accused Sessions of lying under oath during his Senate confirmation hearing because he said that he had no communication with the Russians. But Sessions' response was to a very specific question from Senator Al Franken regarding Sessions' knowledge about communication between Trump campaign members and the Russians about Russian collusion. The question was not, have you ever spoken to a Russian at any point in your life? Which was how the fake news media falsely framed the issue.
CNN just published a story alleging that the intelligence community provided documents to the president-elect last week that included information that, quote, Russian operatives claimed to have compromising personal and financial information about Mr. Trump. These documents also allegedly stated, quote, there was a continuing exchange of information during the campaign between Trump surrogates and intermediaries for the Russian government. Now, again, I'm telling you this as it's coming out, so, you know. But if it's true, it's obviously extremely serious. And if there is any evidence that anyone affiliated with the Trump campaign communicated with the Russian government in the course of this campaign, what will you do?
Senator Franken, I'm not aware of any of those activities. I have been called a surrogate at a time or two in that campaign, and I did not have communications with the Russians, and I'm unable to comment on it.
You like Jason Bourne or James Bond movies?
No. Yes. I do.
Have you ever, in any of these fantastical situations, heard of a plot line so ridiculous that a sitting United States senator and an ambassador of a foreign government colluded at an open setting with hundreds of other people to pull off the greatest caper in the history of espionage?
Thank you for saying that, Senator Cotton. It's just like through the looking glass. I mean, what is this? I explained how, in good faith, I said I had not met with Russians because they were suggesting I, as a surrogate, had been meeting continuously with Russians. I said I didn't meet with them. And now the next thing you know, I'm accused of some reception, plotting some sort of influence campaign for the American election. It's just beyond my capability to understand that.
Even though he didn't do anything wrong, Sessions recused himself from investigations into Trump's presidential campaign on March 2nd of 2017. On May 9th of 2017, Rod Rosenstein produced a memorandum titled Restoring Public Confidence in the FBI, which recommended that Comey be fired over his mishandling of the Clinton email investigation. That same day, President Trump fired Comey. As President of the United States of America, Donald Trump had the legal authority to and could have fired Comey simply because he didn't like the way that Comey's tail stuck out of his yellow suit. President Trump had also been upset with Comey for a number of reasons, including Comey's showboating and Comey refusing to publicly state that he was not under investigation, despite Comey telling him he was not under investigation multiple times privately. On May 9th of 2017, right after Comey was fired, Peter Strzok texted Lisa Page,
"Honey bunny, we need to open the case we've been waiting on now while Andy's acting."
Oh, Pumpkin, we need to lock in redacted in a formal, chargeable way soon.
Andrew McCabe told 60 Minutes that on May 10th, the day after Comey was fired, that he decided that an obstruction of justice investigation into the president needed to be opened. We know that this was a baseless revenge case because on May 11th, the day after McCabe decided an obstruction case needed to be opened, McCabe testified before the Senate that there had been no obstruction.
Has the dismissal of Mr. Comey in any way impeded, interrupted, stopped, or negatively impacted any of the work, any investigation, or any ongoing projects at the Federal Bureau of Investigations?
As you know, Senator, the work of the men and women of the FBI continues despite any changes in circumstance, any decisions. So there has been no effort to impede our investigation to date.
But McCabe wasn't going to let a little something like no underlying evidence of a crime or obstruction dissuade him. Heck, even Peter Strzok had to admit in a discussion about whether or not he should be on Mueller's special counsel team.
Honey bunny, you and I both know the odds are nothing. If I thought it was likely, I'd be there no question. I hesitate in part because of my gut sense and concern. There's no big there. Oh, honey bunny, I can't wait to see you tonight.
The FBI, under now acting FBI Director McCabe, called up Bruce Orr and told him to reestablish contact with the progenitor of lies, Christopher Steele, even though the FBI had fired Steele back in November of 2016. May 16th of 2017 was a dark day for America. It started off with Robert Mueller visiting the White House for an interview to replace the newly fired Comey as director of the FBI.
Bob Mueller had a telephone with him, and it is now believed by many people that the phone was used to broadcast the meeting between the president, Rod Rosenstein, and Bob Mueller back to FBI headquarters where they recorded the conversation with the president. He left that phone in the Oval Office after the meeting. Now, why would you leave your phone in the president's office after a meeting? It was to continue to record what happened after they left.
How did he get in there with a phone? We always have ours taken out.
That's right.
You have to put them in a locker, so that something's fishy right there.
That same day, The New York Times produced an article titled "Comey Memo Says Trump Asked Him to End Flynn Investigation." Comey had been secretly writing memos of his conversations with the president, and he made sure a number of them were leaked to the media after his dismissal. Some of those memos were up-classified or retroactively classified because government officials determined that they contained classified information. This leak was done by Comey in order to get back at President Trump for firing him, with the hope that Comey would be able to get a special counsel assigned.
I asked a friend of mine to share the content of the memo with a reporter. Didn't do it myself for a variety of reasons, but I asked him to because I thought that might prompt the appointment of a special counsel.
On May 9th, Jim Comey is fired. When we deposed him after he was fired, he told us all the way up until May 9th, they still didn't have anything. And that's exactly what Michael Horowitz told us in this report. Even if you accept Horowitz that there was a proper predication for starting this, by January they should have stopped. And because they didn't stop, we wind up getting the Bob Mueller investigation and what that put our country through for over 2 years.
Comey's memos pointed to a conversation that supposedly took place on February 14th of 2017, the day after General Flynn resigned. Comey stated that the president had said in reference to looking at Flynn's conduct that, quote, "I hope you can let this go," unquote. The president denied that he said this, but even if he had, any lawyer worth their salt could tell you that hoping something happens is not the same as giving an order.
If this seems to be something the president's trying to get you to drop it, this seems like a pretty light touch to drop it, to bring it up at that moment, the day after he had just fired Flynn, to come back in and say, I hope we can let this go, but then it never reappears again. Did it slow down your investigation or any investigation that may or may not be occurring with Michael Flynn?
No.
Nevertheless, Comey was now insisting that "I hope you can let this go" was an order to shut down a federal investigation. And President Trump made multiple statements saying that if anyone on his team colluded with the Russians, he wanted to know about it and wanted the investigation to be conducted.
I was interested in your comment that you made as well, that the president said to you if there were some satellite associates of his that did something wrong, it would be good to find that out. That the president seemed to talk to you specifically on March the 30th and say, I'm frustrated that the word is not getting out that I'm not under investigation, but if there are people that are in my circle that are, let's finish the investigation. Is that how you took it as well?
Yes, sir. Yes.
But what makes this truly sinister is when you remember that General Flynn never lied to the FBI. And back on January 30th of 2017, the DOJ, in an internal memo, cleared General Flynn of being a Russian agent, and documentation existed that showed that then FBI Deputy Director McCabe ruled out Logan Act charges against Flynn in January of 2017. Instead of telling President Trump that General Flynn had been cleared of Russian collusion, Comey hid the truth from the president and then cried that the president committed obstruction of justice.
They knew there was no Logan Act violation. They exonerated him completely of being an agent of Russia by the end of January. And yet Mr. Comey still runs to the White House on February 14th and conjures up the entire obstruction of justice narrative against the president when Flynn had been cleared of everything long before that.
Finally, on May 16th of 2017, Andy McCabe and Rod Rosenstein, along with other top government officials, held a meeting where they openly discussed wearing a wire while talking to President Trump.
Rod offered to wear a wire, said he could wear one. He was never, searched or patted down when he went in and out of the White House.
He claimed later that he was joking. Other people in the room said he was not joking. What was your opinion?
I never had the sense that Rod was joking. It was an offer that he made on more than one occasion.
And removing the president via the 25th Amendment.
You were discussing the 25th Amendment, which removes a duly elected president from office.
So Rod brought up the 25th Amendment.
The 25th Amendment grants the vice president and a majority of cabinet members the authority to declare a president physically or mentally incapacitated. The vice president would then become the president. The 25th Amendment was created because of situations like when James Garfield was shot in 1881 but clung to life for another 2.5 months. During those final months, Chester Arthur, the vice president, remained in Washington but avoided any appearance that he had assumed the mantle of office. The 25th Amendment is for situations like the president being in a coma, not for launching a potentially treasonous coup because you don't like who the president is. The day after this meeting, which was May 17th of 2017, Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein appointed former FBI Director Robert Mueller as special counsel to head an investigation into Russian interference. On day one, Mueller goes in there and they give him the case file and he sees that they've got nothing. Actually, they have less than nothing. Their spies reported back that nobody wanted anything to do with Russian collusion. The primary subsource, the guy that provided the information to Steele for the dossier, admitted that the dossier was a hoax, and the dossier was the reason why they were able to get the FISA warrant to spy on the Trump campaign in the first place.
Instead of going in front of the people, picking up the microphone, "Dear America, this is Bob Mueller. This case is a flaming pile of dog. I'm very sorry, America. We're moving on." That's not what he does. We're walking the yellow brick road. I gotta lay little yellow bricks first, though, okay? Bob Mueller then investigates the president for over a year on a charge he already knows is a hoax. They also continue to use a source, Christopher Steele, who they've already been told by the FBI, by a source in January, whose information is complete garbage. The FBI allegedly fires him, and the Mueller team continues to use him as he has an FBI handler throughout the time he's allegedly fired. The warrant approved to continue spying on the Trump team after Mueller's appointed is based on information Mueller knows is a hoax. And not only that, there's approvals to continue to spy on Carter Page, repeating the 17 lies from the prior FISA warrant applications, lies and omissions, categorical lies where they lied to a FISA court. And the biggest lie of all that Mueller does nothing to stop is that Carter Page has been contacting Russians illicitly and could be a spy when he was contacting Russians on behalf of the CIA.
Zero integrity Mueller then loaded the special counsel team full of Trump-hating Democrats. Mueller himself was the only known Republican. Mueller shouldn't have been leading them because President Trump told Mueller why he fired Comey when Mueller went to the White House on May 16th of 2017, which was the day before Rod Rosenstein assigned him as special counsel. Hearing that reason made Mueller a witness in his own investigation, which is illegal.
He may not be the brightest fellow, but I have to say I think he's smarter than to put himself before a committee in which Republicans will be questioning him, as you all say, closely.
Millions of Americans today maintain genuine concerns about your work, in large part because of the infamous and widely publicized bias of your investigating team members, which we now know included 14 Democrats and 0 Republicans. That team of Democrat investigators you hired donated more than $60,000 to the Hillary Clinton campaign and other Democratic candidates. Your team also included Peter Strzok and Lisa Page, which have been discussed today, and they had the lurid text messages that confirmed they openly mocked and hated Donald Trump and his supporters, and they vowed to take him out.
Kevin Kleinsmith, Peter Strzok, and Lisa Page were eventually removed for their undeniable bias. And once again, special counsel group members Zainab Ahmad and Andrew Weissman knew Bruce Orr had been transmitting dossier information from Christopher Steele and Glenn Simpson prior to the election, which should have disqualified them from serving. Andrew Weissman was an infamous dirty trickster. His critics have accused him of having unethical behavior, manipulating the legal system, misleading jurists, intimidating innocent people, and making up crimes that don't exist to charge people with. Weissman was so bad, he'd had multiple convictions overturned upon appeal, including with a unanimous vote at the Supreme Court level.
Andrew Weissman attended Hillary Clinton's election night party. Weissman wrote an email to Deputy Attorney General Yates stating, "I am so proud and in awe," regarding her disobeying a direct order from the president. Ms. Jeannie Rhee represented Hillary Clinton in litigation regarding personal emails originating from Clinton's time as Secretary of State. Aaron Zelbley, the guy sitting next to you, represented Justin Cooper, a Clinton aide who destroyed one of Clinton's mobile devices. I can't imagine a single prosecutor or judge that I have ever appeared in front of
of would be comfortable with these circumstances where over half of the prosecutorial team had a direct relationship to the opponent of the person being investigated.
Trust me, if there was collusion or obstruction to be found, these guys would have found it. I believe that Team Hillary would have continued to investigate President Trump right up until the 2020 election, but there was a new sheriff in town. On February 14th of 2019, Bill Barr became the new Attorney General. He was just as smart as he was tough. Barr had a great sense of humor and he played a mean bagpipe.
Now, how was that for an icebreaker?
When people tried to attack him, he simply outwitted them and made them look silly. The special counsel team concluded their investigation under Barr's leadership. Well, 647 days and more than $30 million later, the world learned what those of us that were following closely knew all along: that there had been no obstruction and no collusion. It really was that simple. There had been no obstruction and no collusion. Mueller didn't find sufficient evidence to charge the president with criminal conspiracy, and when he refused to make a determination on whether or not President Trump obstructed justice, Mueller's inaction kicked the obstruction of justice question back to Attorney General Bill Barr, who reviewed the evidence and determined that there had been no obstruction, and even Rod Rosenstein signed off on it, agreeing that there had been no obstruction.
Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein and I met with him, along with Ed O'Callaghan, who is the principal associate deputy, and he made it very clear several times that that was not his position. He was not saying that but for the OLC opinion he would have found a crime. He made it clear that he had not made the determination that there was a crime.
But Team Hillary needed to muddy the waters and keep the heat on President Trump, and that's why the Mueller report was created. The Mueller report was a 448-page smear campaign against the president. It was split into 2 volumes. Volume 1 covered collusion and Volume 2 covered obstruction. It was designed to be a roadmap to impeachment and to sow confusion in the minds of the public. There were deceptive edits of transcripts and entire issues that were completely ignored. They were supposed to be looking at Russian election interference, but they turned a blind eye to the real Russian interference that took place on the side of Team Hillary. The special counsel team worked extra hard behind the scenes to pull the wool over the eyes of the citizens of the United States by tricking people into believing that President Trump obstructed justice. All right, guys, we got nothing on obstruction and nothing on collusion. But if we say that, our friends are going to be in jail faster than a speeding Clinton body count bullet. We're totally screwed on collusion. We're going to have to admit that no one in the Trump campaign colluded with the Russians. But I've concocted a nefarious plan that relies on the media and the congressional Democrats supporting us while we twist and misinterpret the law. We're going to be distorting obstruction of justice and the OLC, Office of Legal Counsel guidelines. I've got a list of 10 instances that can be misinterpreted as obstruction of justice to help our cause. Trust me, I want to see Trump go down more than anybody. I was there that night at her victory party, you see. She was dressed all in black with a tall, pointy hat. Her green skin had a special glow upon it that could only be described as breathtaking. And when the unthinkable happened, I wept. I wept uncontrollably. I cried more tears than there were drops of water in the whole of the ocean. More than anything, I wanted to take Hillary gently into my arms and console her in that carnal, primal way that a man consoles a woman. But alas, I was too late. She had flown away on her broom.
If you think that was a fairly written report, imagine who was writing it. Andrew Weissman, who was crying at Hillary Clinton's funeral or whatever that was, when she paused.
My memory is not what it used to be. My memory is not what it used to be.
Which president appointed you to become the United States Attorney for Massachusetts?
Which senator?
Which president?
Oh, which president? I think that was President Bush.
According to my notes, it was President Ronald Reagan had the honor to do so.
When you talk about the firm that produced the Steele reporting, the name of the firm that produced that was Fusion GPS. Is that correct?
I'm not familiar with that. And
Well, let me just help you. It's not a trick question. Right? It was Fusion GPS.
And to not know who Fusion GPS is, give me a break. The reason why he didn't know, because he wasn't really engaged in this investigation the whole time.
And when you see Bob Mueller in that pathetic display, you know what happened. Weissman did it all. He made sure that Roger Stone was arrested in the middle of the night with SWAT teams. Bob Mueller slept through this event from beginning to end, and today, his ignominious finale showed him asleep at the hearing.
As you know, obstruction of justice is broken down into 3 elements. 1, there was a pending federal judicial proceeding. 2, the defendant knew of the proceeding. And 3, the defendant had corrupt intent to interfere with or attempted to interfere with the proceeding. Outside of the rare confession, the 3rd element, corrupt intent, makes obstruction very hard to prove when there was no crime committed. 2 people can look at the exact same situation and interpret the motives of a defendant completely differently. And remember, for obstruction of justice to stick, it has to be proven beyond a reasonable doubt. Reasonable doubt is easy to find when you're innocent. Let's look at one of the examples on my list.
Don McGahn didn't carry out an obstruction
and
saved him.
He could have
firing Mueller.
He had a perfect right to fire Mueller. Mueller, at that time, he had several good reasons to fire Mueller. Mueller had substantial conflicts of interest. He had hired a staff that was so prejudiced, it shocks any prosecutor who's fair. He hired a person who was the chief counsel to the Clinton Foundation to investigate Donald Trump. My God, if I were investigating Hillary Clinton and I hired the person who ran the Trump Foundation, I think the media would go nuts on me. So that was a legitimate reason to want to fire Mueller for a very, very bad judgment. Remember, he's the President of the United States. Mueller is not an independent counsel. Mueller works for the Justice Department. He could have been fired at any moment. And unless you could show that he wasn't going to replace him with somebody to take over the investigation like you did with Comey, you'd have no obstruction.
There you go. Reasonable doubt. And you can make the same argument with the other 9 instances I have here. If we had to take this obstruction case to court, we'd be laughed at. Mightily. That's why we can't recommend indicting the president on obstruction. So instead, we're not going to make a determination on obstruction. We'll leave it up in the air and issue a one-sided report that's full of lies and smears the president. The media and the people who hate President Trump won't have the ability to look at the situation objectively. And they'll cry he obstructed justice when we all know he didn't. Ha 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 ha. They use tricky language to pretend that Mueller couldn't make a recommendation on obstruction because the Office of Legal Counsel guidelines say you can't indict a sitting president. And while they say you can't indict a sitting president, they don't say that you can't recommend charges, which is exactly what Ken Starr did with the Bill Clinton impeachment.
Mueller could have written up, just like Ken Starr did many years ago, I find the president did this and he's guilty. I find he committed perjury here and he's guilty. And, one after another with Ken Starr. And he could have done that. That doesn't mean that the president gets indicted. That means that he said he found sufficient evidence for an indictment.
If we had confidence that the president clearly did not commit a crime, we would have said so. We did not, however, make a determination as to whether the president did commit a crime. A president cannot be charged with a federal crime while he is in office. Those were the principles under which we operated, and from them we concluded that we would not reach a determination, one way or the other, about whether the president committed a crime.
And I'd like to ask you, the reason, again, that you did not indict Donald Trump is because of OLC opinion stating that you cannot indict a sitting president, correct?
That is correct. I want to add one correction to my testimony this morning. I want to go back to one thing that was said this morning by Mr. Liu, who said, and I quote, "You didn't charge the president because of the OLC opinion." That is not the correct way to say it. As we say in the report, and as I said at the opening, we did not reach a determination as to whether the president committed a crime.
You noted 8 times in your report that you had a legal duty under the regulations to either prosecute or decline charges. Despite this, you disregarded that duty. You made the decision on the Russian interference. You couldn't have indicted the president on that, and you made the decision on that. But when it came to obstruction, you threw a bunch of stuff up against the wall to see what would stick. And that is fundamentally unfair.
Next, they took advantage of the fact that exoneration means something different to lay people than it does to lawyers. When the average Joe hears the word exoneration, he thinks it means the same thing as being innocent or being acquitted, but it doesn't. The actual legal definition of exoneration is to lift, remove the stain of being called out for blame, liability, or punishment. It is more than just freeing an accused person of the responsibility for a criminal or otherwise illegal or wrongful act. It is publicly stating that this accused should never have been accused in the first place. Exoneration is a much higher standard than acquittal. Acquittal is when someone is freed by a court generally as a result of lack of evidence. In order to be exonerated, the prosecutor has to say that he felt that you never should have been accused in the first place. And it didn't matter what the evidence was. Under no circumstances were we ever gonna say that President Trump should have never been accused in the first place. Haha. If people had to be exonerated in order to be found not guilty, imagine how messed up that would be. Bob is accused of robbing a bank, but he's innocent. The prosecutor doesn't have any evidence that Bob robbed the bank, but the prosecutor doesn't like guys with handlebar mustaches. He thinks all guys with handlebar mustaches are shady, so he refuses to state that Bob should have never been charged in the first place. Innocent Bob is now in jail due to his questionable choices in facial hair. That's called being guilty until proven innocent. It's the exact opposite of our law. Being innocent until proven guilty. And it's exactly what we're doing to President Trump. Haha. Really, the only time we ever need to say that someone never should have been accused in the first place is when a person who's been convicted of a crime is officially cleared based on new evidence of innocence. Pardons can be forms of exoneration. President Trump never went to court and was found guilty, so there's no reason for him to need to be exonerated. When we say we do not exonerate him, what we are actually saying is nonsensical. But we are saying it because, and now this is the clever part, we are saying it because people that do not know what exoneration actually means will think that if President Trump wasn't exonerated, then that means he's guilty. When legally, we're not saying that at all. Ha 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 ha! Now marvel at the beauty of this carefully crafted statement from the Mueller report. Accordingly, while this report does not conclude that the president committed a crime, it also does not exonerate him. Since we all know that President Trump never needed to be and never would be exonerated, all this statement really says is that we didn't find that the president committed a crime. But that's not how people will read it. Ha 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 ha!
The Attorney General in the appointment order gave you powers and authorities that reside in the Attorney General. And what I'm putting up here is the United States Code. This is where the Attorney General gets his power, and the Constitution, and the annotated cases of these, which we've searched. And we got the criminal law textbook from your law school. Mr. Mueller, nowhere in these, because we had them scanned, is there a process or description on exonerate. If the Attorney General doesn't have the power to exonerate, then you don't have the power to exonerate. And so this is the part that I don't understand. If your report is to the Attorney General, you don't have to tell him that you're not exonerating the president.
No, we included in the report for exactly that reason. He may not know it, and he should know it.
So you believe that the Attorney Bill Barr believes that somewhere in the hallways of the Department of Justice there's an Office of Exoneration?
No, that's not what I said.
Well, I believe he knows, and I don't believe you put that in there for Mr. Barr. I think you put that in there for exactly what I'm going to discuss next, and that is, so the Washington Post yesterday, when speaking of your report, the article said Trump could not be exonerated of trying to obstruct the investigation itself. Now, Mr. Mueller, what you know is that this can't say Mueller exonerated Trump, because you don't have the power or authority to exonerate Trump. You have no more power to declare him exonerated than you have the power to declare him Anderson Cooper. The statement about exoneration is misleading, and it's meaningless, and it colors this investigation.
You, in the corner, add that list of 10 possible obstruction charges to the report. It'll be like a Rorschach ink block test. People who want to see crimes will see crimes. If we're really lucky, the Democrats will be able to use this to impeach President Trump, and then hopefully none of our friends will wind up in the pokey. Here, Mueller, sign this.
Tell President Reagan the British are coming.
It's perfect. The people will be left confused and fighting amongst each other once we tell them that while we do not recommend obstruction charges, we also do not exonerate the president. And this plan all works perfectly, just so long as Robert Mueller never
has to testify.
The investigation was over, and the president was innocent. But Democrats like Nadler wouldn't stop. They wanted Trump team members to return and testify in front of them again and again and again so they could retry the case in Congress.
The Mueller report concluded there was no collusion, no obstruction, because the report failed to provide damning information against the president. The majority claims we need to dig deeper. Deeper than the 2 years of investigation conducted by what is considered a prosecutorial dream team, because that probe ended without criminal charges against the president or his family. The special counsel closed up shop without giving Democrats anything to deliver to their base.
2 years, 19 lawyers, 40 FBI agents, $25 million to look at all things Trump. Once Mueller gives an outcome they don't like, they want to take Mueller's work product and politicize it. They just want an outcome. It doesn't matter how you get Trump. It doesn't matter if you trick the FISA court. It doesn't matter if you infiltrate the campaign. The goal is to stop Trump, and the rules don't matter. This is a very dangerous time in American history.
These disgusting politicians didn't give a crap about what these men and women had already been through.
Early MAGA people, who all of us, about 50 of us, and the kids and the wives and kids and husbands, all got caught up in this. But a lot of people lost jobs, and I know one family where both the mother and the father lost a job. Everybody lost business, and people lost really, appointments to the president's senior staff, like, assistant secretary level of major departments. It really decimated a lot of lives.
It's a horrible thing when you have to represent somebody who's innocent. I mean, I could see in his eyes sometimes he would say to me, I didn't do anything with the Russians. I didn't do anything. How could they do this? He handled it better than anyone could possibly handle it. The only time he would really get upset, not about him, but about his family and about his co-workers and the people who came to Washington to change things and left having spent a lot of money, completely upset and dispirited.
There were 30 different investigations going on all at the same time, and people were testifying in front of various groups. Multiple families had to sell their homes to cover mounting court costs.
After a House Permanent Select Committee of Intelligence hearing in 2017, and then a Senate committee hearing on Tuesday, and now I'm sitting before the Mueller team on Wednesday. We're at about $125,000. I want to tell you, we were on our way out of our homes. $125,000 more I make in a year. People got deep into the 5 figures, really deep into the 6 figures. But Roger, Paul, General Flynn, all these fellas, they're spending millions and millions of dollars.
There was damage to reputations and death threats.
Representative Jackie Speer brought my name up and my wife's name up in the hearing and called me Putin's image maker. The threats to our family came just one after the other from there, death threat after death threat. One guy called me after that hearing on the phone and said, I know you're not home. We're going to burn your house down with your wife and children inside. These death threats haven't stopped since that day.
No one in the Trump campaign was indicted on anything having to do with Russian collusion. If the special counsel thought you ripped a tag off a mattress, you were going to jail. George Papadopoulos spent 14 days in jail for lying to the FBI, in part because he spoke to them without a lawyer and got the date he met Mifsud wrong. Michael Cohen, President Trump's former personal attorney, received 3 years in jail for multiple charges, including tax evasion and lying to Congress. Roger Stone is facing up to 9 years for multiple counts, including obstruction, lying to Congress, and intimidating a witness who said he wasn't intimidated. Paul Manafort, President Trump's former campaign chairman, received 7.5 years on a variety of counts, including tax fraud. Manafort initially had a FISA warrant taken out on him back in 2014 for his work in the Ukraine, but it had lapsed due to lack of evidence. Isn't it funny how he wasn't charged with anything until he decided to work for the Trump campaign?
They put Paul Manafort into solitary confinement and brought him out 9 times, 9, and said, are you ready to tell us that the president knew about the Trump Tower meeting prior to the meeting? Which wouldn't have been a crime in any event, but they were going to make it one. But, I mean, they tried to get people to give false information about the president so that they could bring the collusion charge.
Indicting people for process crimes gave the special counsel the ability to say, hey, there might not have been any collusion with Russia, but look at all these bad guys we found, so our investigation was totally legitimate. But it wasn't.
As Mueller was conducting this operation, this investigation, as he built that investigation out, and when he found things that didn't directly do with the scope memo, what he was supposed to be investigating with, he sent those off, right? So he busted people like Michael Cohen, Trump's attorney. That's a good example. Well, wait a second. You were looking at intel. You were looking at leaks of classified information like Michael Flynn, General Flynn's conversation with the Russian ambassador that leaked out all over the place. There was no criminal referral there.
While all of this phony Russian collusion nonsense was going on, the news became so partisan that if you were watching conservative outlets, you were getting the truth, but if you were watching liberal outlets, you were watching nothing but lies.
As if there are no shoes on the Trump human centipede that are not about Russia. Russia, Russia, Russia.
It's clear that Mueller is now connecting the dots.
Donald Trump's done. He's done. There's no question about it.
He's got to know his future looks like it's behind bars.
We have a treasonous president.
Presidency is effectively a Russian op.
And there was no presumption of innocence or interest in the truth.
Collusion. If there was not collusion, there was at least the effort to collude.
There was collusion. If they just do their work and do their job, they will find out it was collusion.
And this embarrassing excuse for news coverage didn't just stop at the Russian collusion narrative. It extended to everything.
According to a new report from Axios, President Trump has been very interested in a brilliant plan to stop hurricanes. Drop a nuclear bomb on them. This morning, the president tweeted from the G7 summit in France calling the story ridiculous.
They couldn't even let the man have a 4th of July parade.
So what is the message Donald Trump is trying to send by rolling tanks down Constitution Avenue? The message is a threat. But it's always a threat when you roll out your military. But it's to whom is the threat? And I suspect that the threat is to his fellow Americans.
This kind of hysteria led in part to the popularization of two terms: fake news media and Trump derangement syndrome.
Donald J. Trump is now president of the United States.
Yes, I have thought an awful lot about blowing up the White House.
When was the last time an actor assassinated a president?
Kathy Griffin intended to create a national firestorm with her bloody beheading stunt this week. She did, and it backfired, resulting in public scorn, the loss of sponsorships and gigs. And even Griffin admitted she went too far in a video posted online. But today, she wasn't very contrite, claiming she was the one who was wrong.
I'm going to be honest, he broke me. He broke me. He broke. And then I was like, no, this isn't right. It's just not right.
Oh my God, honestly.
And it wasn't just celebrities that suffered from Trump derangement syndrome.
This is a sadness, it is a mourning moment, and it is a moment filled with fear.
This was a white lash. It was a white lash against a black president in part.
Apparently, the president gets 2 scoops. You know, everyone around the table gets 1. And no word if there were sprinkles.
Donald Trump allowed right-wing Christians to finally vote for Caligula, Judas, and the Golden Calf.
He looked like a thug. He looked like a goon. You look at the handshake. You look at this. Just what a thug! What an embarrassment! Look, he's mauling him.
Donald Trump again being a schmuck.
Is this president trying to impersonate Hugo Chavez, Recep Tayyip Erdogan, Vladimir Putin?
Love is the single most important word that Donald Trump does not understand, and very sadly for him, it's possible that he has never felt this in his entire life.
Feel better? Somewhat. You going to pacifier?
The president said that we will fly our flags at half-mast until August 8th. That's 8-8. The numbers 8-8 are very significant in neo-Nazi and white supremacy movement. Why? Because the letter H is the 8th letter of the alphabet, and to them, the numbers 8-8 together stand for Heil Hitler. No one's thinking about this.
But as chilling as that is to hear, Frank, we're going to keep asking you to come back.
Trump is as destructive a person in this century as Hitler, Stalin, and Mao were in the last century.
he may be responsible for many more million deaths than they were.
Trump could offer Alaska to the Russians in exchange for support in the next election, or decide to move to Mar-a-Lago permanently and let Jared Kushner run the country.
Trump derangement syndrome, out of control. Remember, if your dog bites, if the bee stings, if the baby cries and you're feeling sad, it's all President Trump's fault. Now, according to the editorial board of the New York Times, Hurricane Florence is also President Trump's fault. I'm not making this up. Look at the headline on your screen. Another hurricane is about to batter our coast. Trump is complicit.
The Washington Post cited studies from Media Research Center and Harvard University's Shorstein Center that both concluded that the mainstream media's coverage was overwhelmingly negative of President Trump. The Harvard study looked at his first 100 days and reported that Trump received 3 times the amount of coverage of any prior president, with 80% of that coverage being negative in nature. The Media Research Center looked at a different time frame, but found the coverage of President Trump to be greater than 90% negative. I don't know if the leftist media was willfully ignorant or woefully ignorant, but it was insane. They unfairly edited him to twist his words, constantly took things out of context, and lied about him being a racist.
The president is not messing up here. He did not trip and accidentally praise white supremacists and neo-Nazis and pro-Confederate demonstrators who actually killed somebody this weekend.
We also learned today that the president continues to believe, against all the evidence, that there were very fine people on both sides. He's trying to gaslight us again, asking us to believe something contrary to what you and I and everybody can see with our own ears.
We condemn in the strongest possible terms this egregious display of hatred, bigotry, and violence. It has no place in America. The driver of the car is a disgrace to himself, his family, and this country. The driver of the car is a murderer, and what he did was a horrible, horrible, inexcusable thing. You had a group on one side that was bad, and you had a group on the other side that was also very violent. I've condemned neo-Nazis. I've condemned many different groups. Following day, it looked like they had some rough, bad people. Neo-Nazis, white nationalists, whatever you want to call them. And you had some very bad people in that group. But you also had people that were very fine people on both sides. You had people in that group, excuse me, I saw the same pictures as you did. You had people in that group that were there to protest the taking down of, to them, a very, very important statue and the renaming of a park from Robert E. Lee to another name.
Robert E. Lee are not the same.
No, George Washington was a slave owner. Was George Washington a slave owner? So will George Washington now lose his status? And you had people, and I'm not talking about the neo-Nazis and the white nationalists, because they should be condemned totally. But you had many people in that group other than neo-Nazis and white nationalists, okay? And the press has treated them absolutely unfairly. Now, in the other group also, you had some fine people, but you also had troublemakers, and you see them come with the black outfits and with the helmets and with the baseball bats. You had a lot of bad people in the other group too. You had a group on one side and you had a group on the other, and they came at each other with clubs, and it was vicious and it was horrible. I thought what took place was a horrible moment for our country.
It got so bad that the media just started making up fake news stories.
The media, facts were only an afterthought. Any anonymous source, yes, they believed. Like BuzzFeed's bombshell about the president directing Michael Cohen to lie, which Mueller's report exposed as totally false, or NPR being embarrassed after it lied about John Jr.'s Senate testimony, or McClatchy blatantly wrong about Michael Cohen's trip to Prague. It never happened. Or The Guardian reporting a fake conspiracy about Mueller and Julian Assange.
3 CNN employees forced to resign after reporting an untrue Russia-related story about our friend, the mooch, Anthony Scaramucci. Or Brian Ross leaving ABC after a fake news story about Trump and Russia that actually impacted negatively the stock market. There was fake hysteria about a Russian spy in the White House. Or Bloomberg forced to correct their story about Trump and Deutsche Bank. And the New York Times had to walk back claims about Paul Manafort sharing polling data with a Russian oligarch. And don't forget the Washington Post having to correct their story about Russians hacking a Vermont utility, which wasn't true. He's attacking the fact that a reporter, you see Dave Weigel there, had suggested it was not a large crowd. He was using a photograph that was taken apparently hours before the event. Number 4, you see the bust there of Dr. King. Time magazine falsely reported that the president had removed that bust from the Oval Office. Number 3, the president, in his words, says CNN falsely reported that candidate Donald Trump and his son, Donald Trump Jr., had gotten special access to hacked documents from WikiLeaks before they were made public. That was not true. Number 2, it's ABC News' Brian Ross. Remember that he got suspended. That report suggested that General Flynn was going to tell the special counsel, Robert Mueller, that there was Russian collusion dating back to the campaign. That was not true. The problem, of course, is that the stock market had had a bit of a crash after that news. And number 1, this is interesting. New York Times columnist Paul Krugman said that the economy would never recover from the Trump victory.
But the American public saw through their lies, and their ratings plummeted.
You are now at 13th place in national ratings, behind Nick at Night, which is at 11. Tucker Carlson gets 4 million viewers. You barely scratched 800,000.
Hopefully soon, the only people left watching the fake news media will be the people that you couldn't convince that the guy they've been sending their money to with the Nigerian accent really isn't the Prince of Norway. Social media giants played their part by shadow banning, suspending, and outright banning conservative voices that were in defense of President Trump. I'll get you, my pretty. And your little frog, too. And they really got the little frog. 2 weeks after Donald Trump Jr. posted a Trump Pepe meme, the Anti-Defamation League declared the beloved little green frog is a symbol of hate. And Vanity Fair ran with the headline, Donald Trump Jr. shares white supremacist meme. I guess they decided to ignore the fact that one of their white supremacists was a prominent African-American neurosurgeon. Everything Trump supporters did or said was labeled as racist too, despite there being tons of minority Trump supporters. People from politicians to just regular citizens wearing MAGA hats were kicked out of restaurants and shouted down. We saw the rise of Antifa, a far-left terrorist organization that became the darlings of the fake news media. Lunatic leftists began assaulting politicians and Trump supporters. And crazy liberal politicians supported these actions.
When they go low, we kick them. That's what this new Democratic Party is about.
All right, man. Please get up in the face of some Congress people.
Yeah, we know where you live, too, man. We know where you live.
And if you see anybody from that cabinet in a restaurant, in a department store, at a gasoline station, you get out and you create a crowd. And you push back on them. And you tell them they're not welcome anymore, anywhere.
Let my wife through.
We believe survivors.
For God, we believe survivors.
You cannot be civil with a political party that wants to destroy what you stand for, what you care about. That's why I believe if we are fortunate enough to win back the House and/or the Senate, that's when civility can start again. But until then, the only thing that the Republicans seem to recognize and respect is strength.
Congressman Steve Scalise was shot and badly wounded and is now in stable condition at the hospital, along with 2 very courageous Capitol police officers.
There is no reason to have all of this strife and violence going on. We are not enemies. We are brothers and sisters and mothers and fathers and sons and daughters and friends and neighbors. The deep state has pitted us against each other to distract us from their crimes. Have you ever thought about what it would look like if we had a president that really did go after political corruption? He'd have to be an outsider. Someone that didn't get rich by taking bribes for political favors. Someone that would question why so many members of Congress became multimillionaires on an upper middle class salary. Someone that would expose their nihilism and pay-for-play schemes.
I said, I'm telling you, you're not getting $1 billion. I said, you're not getting $1 billion. I'm going to be leaving here. And I think it was, 6 hours? I looked, I said, I'm leaving in 6 hours. If the prosecutor's not fired, you're not getting the money. Oh, son of a bitch. Got fired.
Would this president be welcomed with open arms? What about the corporations that paid money to those politicians? Would they be happy about someone preventing them from buying influence? No, of course not. This is what it looks like when you drain the swamp. You are mercilessly attacked on all sides, and the utterly despicable way that President Trump has been treated would have broken a lesser man.
Our movement is about replacing a failed and corrupt political establishment with a new government controlled by you, the American people. The Washington establishment and the financial and media corporations that fund it exists for only one reason: to protect and enrich itself. The political establishment that is trying to stop us is the same group responsible for our disastrous trade deals. They've stripped away these towns bare and raided the wealth for themselves and taken our jobs away out of our country, never to return unless I'm elected president. Anyone who challenges their control is deemed a sexist, a racist, a xenophobe, and morally deformed. The Clinton machine is at the center of this power structure. We've seen this firsthand in the WikiLeaks documents, in which Hillary Clinton meets in secret with international banks to plot the destruction of U.S. sovereignty in order to enrich these global financial powers, her special interest friends, and her donors. Honestly, she should be locked up. The most powerful weapon deployed by the Clintons is the corporate media. Hillary Clinton is also given approval and veto power over quotes written about her in the New York Times. They definitely do not do that to me. In my former life, I was an insider as much as anybody else, and I still know what it's like to be an insider. It's not bad. Now I'm being punished for leaving the special club and revealing to you the terrible things that are going on having to do with our country. They knew they would throw every lie they could at me and my family and my loved ones. They knew they would stop at nothing to try to stop me. But I never knew it would be this vile, that it would be this bad, that it would be this vicious. Nevertheless, I take all of these slings and arrows gladly for you. I take them for our movement so that we can have our country back. I didn't need to do this, folks, believe me. Believe me, I built a great company, and I had a wonderful life. I could have enjoyed the fruits and benefit of years of successful business deals and businesses for myself and my family. Instead of going through this absolute horror show of lies, I'm doing it because this country has given me so much, and I feel so strongly that it's my turn to give back to the country that I love. But I also know that it's not about me. It's about all of you, and it's about our country. The only thing that can stop this corrupt machine is you. The only force strong enough to save our country is us. The only people brave enough to vote out this corrupt establishment is you, the American people. We will take back this country for you, and we will make America great again.
The deep state loves to accuse you of doing the crimes that they themselves have committed. They investigated the Trump campaign for exactly what the Clinton campaign did. Supposedly, the Trump campaign was colluding with the Russians to get dirt on Hillary, but it was actually the Clinton campaign and the DNC that paid a former British spy to get dirt on Trump from Russians. And the truth was, and still is, being hidden from the public by a willful and complicit media, making Spygate the greatest story never told.
Imagine if you find out you're the President of the United States, all you did was win an election, and you find out the massive machinery of the federal government with the ability to slap bracelets on you in the form of handcuffs, take your life and your freedom, was turned against you. Folks, this happened. This is the biggest scandal of our generation. There's no close second. This makes Watergate look like romper room.
We saw protocol violated in both the Hillary Clinton email investigation and then also in the genesis of the Trump-Russia investigation. And it is ludicrous that you had all of the exact same people that paved a yellow brick road for Hillary Clinton all of a sudden ending up on the FBI's Trump-Russia investigation and then recruited by Robert Mueller.
Director Comey's been fired. Deputy Director McCabe fired, lied 3 times under oath according to the Inspector General. FBI counsel Jim Baker demoted and left, currently under investigation by the Justice Department. Lisa Page demoted and left. Peter Strzok, deputy head of counterintelligence, demoted and fired. Peter Strzok, the guy who ran the Clinton investigation and the Russian investigation. There was certainly a failure of leadership at the upper echelon of the FBI.
It has been evident from day one that there was a brazen plot to exonerate Hillary Clinton illegally, and then if she lost the election, to frame Donald Trump. This dossier was a knowing part of that. It was created by Hillary Clinton. It was created knowingly by John Brennan as part of a scheme to do everything they could to harm Donald Trump. There are going to be indictments. There's going to be grand juries. John Brennan isn't going to need 1 lawyer. He's going to need 5.
We have to have real action taken against these people who did this, because we can't afford for this ever to happen again. The most powerful intelligence operations ever built in the history of the planet, tens of billions of dollars a year that are supposed to keep this country safe, were turned and used on a political campaign. That should never, ever happen in this country.
The President of the United States of America was spied on and framed by members of his predecessor's administration. It was outrageous. It was disgusting. It was disgraceful. And worst of all, it was un-American. The damage they did was so insidious and so pervasive that there will be people that go to their graves still believing that their fellow citizens elected a Russian agent to lead this great nation. The term beneath contempt was specifically created for people like these. If they are allowed to get away with doing this to an American president, just think about what they will be able to get away with doing to you. We have not seen a thing like this in all the history of our country, and we all better pray to God that we never do again. All hail the witch in the north! I'm here to tell you that you've had the power to go home all this time. Really? No. I'm melting. Oh, what a world, what a world, what a world.
Ping pong. Wicked Witch is dead. Ping pong. The nasty witch is dead. Ping pong. The wicked witch is dead. I'm glad she's dead. Ping pong. The wicked witch is dead. She's really dead. Ping pong. I'm glad she's dead. Dead, 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 dead.
We have proven that we can actually be civil to each other. In fact, just before taking the dais, Hillary accidentally bumped into me, and she very civilly said, "Pardon me."
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like this video, subscribe, give it a thumbs up, and please share it. You can help us continue to fight in the war against disinformation by donating at paypal.me/rightleftofcenter and at subscribestar.com/rightleftofcenter. I'm Right from Right Left of Center, and if you're watching, you're probably right too.